Zelda Invades Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101, The Ownership of the Artifact. Odin was very upset about punishing his son. When he turned around, he was furious to find that he had inexplicably handed over his treasured Thor's hammer to a stranger. But since he had said it, it was not convenient to refuse. After all, the promise of Odin, the father of the gods, was far more important than a Thor's hammer. But Thor's hammer contained Odin's high hopes for Thor. Odin hoped that Thor could regain his strength and responsibility and pick up Mjolnir again. But Odin could not regret what he had said. He thought to himself, it's just a Thor's hammer. I can ask the dwarves to make one later. Although he accepted the fact. But Link's taking advantage of the fire also angered Odin, and his eyes staring at Link were full of coldness. Loki came up and whispered to Odin, I will find a chance to kill Link and take back Mjolnir. Odin glared at Loki, and a reproachful look stopped Loki's behavior. Just when Odin was filled with regret, Link put away his smile, turned Thor's hammer upside down, and handed the hammer handle to Odin. He said, King Odin, I'm kidding. This Thor's hammer belongs to Thor. Take it back. Odin said in a stiff tone, Child, do you think I will retaliate against you later, so you return the Thor's hammer that already belongs to you? If so, you underestimate the character of Odin, the father of the gods. My promise is as sacred as the law of heaven. I will not undermine the authority of my father of the gods for a mere Thor's hammer. Odin glanced at Loki. He thought that Loki's whispered words just now were overheard by Link. So he continued to promise, I will not break my promise and snatch the Thor's hammer that belongs to you. I will not instruct my ministers to cause trouble for you. Since you can hold the Thor's hammer, it means that you are a warrior with noble character and have been recognized by Mjolnir. So, don't be afraid. But Link insisted on his will, put the Thor's hammer on the ground, and stepped back 2 steps. Although he envied Thor, he came out with a hard artifact, strong and tough, and he could smash wherever he went without worrying about the damage of the weapon. But Link is not someone who likes to seize other people's things, including the vibranium shield that he has not returned to Rogers yet. Link will play with it for a while and return it to Captain America when he returns to Earth. Of course, if he refuses to return it, Rogers can't do anything because Rogers can't beat Link anyway. In terms of ownership, Link can also ask Tony to help him argue, saying that this is temporarily borrowed from Rogers by Tony's father, so it still belongs to the Stark family. Let Tony give the shield to Link. Tony will definitely not refuse. However, just like Odin can't tolerate Link taking advantage of the fire, Link also has his own principles. He will not seize the treasure that belongs to Thor. And, although Link is very good at fighting with a hammer, he prefers swords and bows. Thor's hammer is strong, but it is too inconsistent with Link's image. Odin looked at Link, who handed over a divine weapon, and his expression became much more relaxed. He said gently, you should know that, if you take Thor's hammer, I won't hate you. But if you return it, I won't be grateful to you. Do you really want to do this? Link nodded naturally. Loki would not miss the opportunity to trick Thor, and said with a wicked smile, Link, it's not too late for you to regret now. If you use Thor's hammer, you will have the power of Thor. Link crossed his fingers, and between his palms, a dazzling electric light was released. Link said, the power of thunder and lightning, I have it myself. Link directly used the magnetic gripper to control Thor's hammer, lifted it up, and threw it into the rainbow bridge that had not disappeared yet. The speed of the rainbow bridge was close to teleportation, and it was estimated that it had fallen into the desert of New Mexico at this moment. Link had a strange feeling. He reminded Natasha to pay attention to a hammer falling in New Mexico, but at this point, he didn't expect that it was the hammer he dropped. Link calmly gave up the treasure he had obtained, which moved Odin at once. Odin knocked the spear on the floor and said, my child, you have shown your precious qualities. Although I will not be grateful to you, I still want to reward you. I will give you a chance. What do you want? Become the master of the earth, or join the ranks of Asgard and get a weapon that can stand shoulder to shoulder with Thor. I can satisfy you. Child. It has always been only Asgard that has given favors to others, and Asgard never owes favors to others. Link's eyes lit up. If you insist, please give me a hard sword. It doesn't need to be sharp, nor does it have special features, as long as it won't be easily damaged. The father of the gods laughed. Just a hard weapon? Asgard has never lacked weapons. So he took Link to visit the palace armory, not Odin's collection treasury. On the way, Mipha suddenly whispered to Link, "That is my light scale spear, okay?" Link's face was embarrassed and he coughed. "It's okay, I kept it well." Actually, it wasn't. After Link accepted the gift from the old king of the Zora tribe, he continued his adventure with the best looking weapon in Hyrule, the light scale spear, which was Mipha's favorite. But less than 3 hours later, Link blew it up during a battle between Link and the centaur. Link felt a little guilty, and Mipha looked at Link with suspicion. "I really kept it carefully. I put it in my house in Herald Village, hanging it on the wall with other heroes' weapons. In fact, it was all blown up by Link." Odin and Loki have not seen the horror of Link destroying weapons. Link even planned a way to defeat Thanos, based on his own ability to destroy weapons. At that time, on Titan, he would team up with Tony, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, and the dance troupe to snatch Thanos' glove. After Link used it a few times, the Infinity Gauntlet exploded, and Thanos' plan was shattered. He happily told Zelda about his plan. However, Zelda's point of view is, "We've already snatched the gloves, why do you have to use the bomb?" Odin ordered his men to open his weapon vault and saw a long passage inside. 2 rows of compartments, and all kinds of strange weapons and armor were placed inside. Odin casually pulled out a broadsword and handed it to Link. "How about this one?" This broadsword was once the weapon of a capable general under Hela, and it was extremely sharp. Link took it curiously and fiddled with it. He came to a relatively empty space, waved it twice, frowned and shook his head. "No, I use it 5 or 6 times, and this sword will break." Odin frowned, a little dissatisfied with Link's crazy talk, and snorted, "HMPH. Then try to break it for me." It took me a whole year to complete Breath of the Wild. After defeating Thunder God, I returned to the house in Herald Village, put the weapons of the 4 heroes on my back, and teleported to the castle. I was reluctant to use the heroes' weapons. In the sequel to the novel, the 3 heroes' weapons, a shield, and a bow and arrow will all appear. Thank you Xiu Sheng for your support of 588 book coins. Thank you Cheoji Dazao Yeo for your support of 100 Kidian coins. Thank you ZUIUK for your support of 100 Kidian coins. Thank you all book friends for your recommendation votes. Chapter 102 Artifact Mistodin. Pa. In front of Link was a statue of a general made of special stone, used by the Asgard warriors to practice martial arts. It was full of traces of knife cuts and sword stabs, and had witnessed the growth of the Asgard warriors for tens of thousands of years. The latest traces came from Link's sword. When Link held the broad-faced great sword and chopped the statue of the general for the 7th time, the weapon could not withstand Link's force and broke into pieces, exploding on the statue of the general, causing it to shake and washing out many tiny traces on the surface. Odin's eyes twitched. This broad-faced great sword had accompanied the general under Hela for 1,000 years and had experienced the most tragic war period in Odin's early years. The broad-faced great sword had never been damaged. But in Link's hands, it shattered with only 6 slashes. "Give him another one." Odin ordered Loki to get the weapon. Pa. After a series of slashes, the weapon exploded again. This made Odin a little embarrassed. "Are you cursed?" Odin looked at Link, who spread his hands towards him, puzzled. In Odin's opinion, Link's pure strength was not that strong. Compared with his son Thor, he was much weaker. But for some reason, the weapon seemed to become fragile and easy to break in Link's hand. It was as if he was cursed by the god of weapons. Odin once again ordered Loki to hand Link a sword for experiment. The weapons that can be stored in Odin's arsenal are naturally not ordinary items, and they all have their own glorious history. Even if they are not as powerful as divine weapons such as Thor's hammer and Gungnir, their power is extraordinary. Snap. Link swung again, and the weapon exploded. This one was even less durable, and could only support Link's 3 swings. Link looked at Odin with a puzzled look. Why are these weapons not as durable as the weapons made by Tony? Link always thought that Tony's weapons were not durable, but he actually blamed Tony a little wrongly. Tony spent a lot of effort on improving the stability of the sword body in view of Link's frequent use of explosive weapons, and after many iterations, the durability has been greatly improved. It is almost the limit of what the Earth's technology can do. Odin looked at the marks on the statue of the general and nodded. I know the weapon that suits you, Kit, come with me. Link and Mipha wanted to take a look, and then followed Odin. Odin looked a little tired, because of exiling his beloved son. Link, your sword is so powerful, that ordinary metals can't bear it. Here, except for Thor's Mjolnir and the Gungnir in my hand, other weapons can't support your use like this. Maybe some weapons can sustain your use for a period of time, but sooner or later they will explode. But, here is a weapon that can't be considered a weapon, which should be very suitable for you. Mistletoe sword Mistidin. They came to a tree outside. There were clumps of green and yellow mistletoe on the tree. Odin waved his hand, and a clump of mistletoe broke open, and a tender branch fell into Odin's wrinkled and sturdy palm. Odin played with the mistletoe branch in his hand and said, this is an alien. It seems to have life. Look. The mistletoe began to twist, and in the blink of an eye it turned into a long sword with wooden texture. Odin rubbed the sword with his fingers and said, it can transform into a sword. Mistin twisted again. It can also transform into a long branch. Mistin is very tough, and will recover on its own. It cannot be hurt by a knife or fire. But because it is transformed from mistletoe, it has no edge. Apart from stabbing and causing some damage, it has no other attack power. He handed Mistin to Link. Mistin immediately turned into a wooden longsword. Link swung it twice in the air, and the longsword was slightly bent by the air resistance. Then Link released the sword energy, and swung it 3 times in a row. Snap. Mistin exploded, and wood chips flew everywhere. Only half of the stump was left in Link's hand. But in the blink of an eye, the broken mistletoe quickly regenerated and became complete, forming a long sword again. Link's eyes lit up, a weapon that can regenerate. He finally has a long sword that can be used infinitely. Odin continued, and Mistitine will become stronger and harder to destroy according to your usage habits. What do you think? Link immediately thanked Odin. I like it very much. Thank you, King Odin. Odin smiled. As long as you like it. He looked at Link playing with the sword of Mistitine and remembered Thor when he was a child. Link said, can you send me back to Earth? Odin smiled. Of course. Family disgrace should not be made public. You have seen the quarrel between my father and me. I hope you will not tell outsiders. I will not keep you any longer. Link shook his head. Odin's words family disgrace should not be made public just now reminded Link of the original Time and Space Avengers 3, when Thor, after his family was destroyed, still made light of the heavy task, and talked and laughed with the daughter of his enemy Thanos, the king of Asgard. It seems that some of the characteristics are inherited from the same line. Odin ordered Loki to take Link to find Heimdall, and he left. On the way, Loki kept smiling and said, I hope my brother can stay on Earth happily. Link said nothing, but he knew that Loki was very angry and panicked at the moment and wanted to find Odin to ask clearly and figure out his identity. But in front of Link, an outsider, Loki still looked a little cynical and calm. After all, this is a god of mischief and a master of disguise. They came to Heimdall. Heimdall looked at Link, and a low voice came from the helmet. I saw you fighting with that monster. Are you chasing that monster? Link knew that the monster Heimdall was talking about was Ganon pollution, so he nodded. Heimdall said, you are very brave. Then he suddenly inserted the sword into the sword slot, and a rainbow bridge was born on the side, with a turbulent and violent torrent of colorful light. When Link jumped into the rainbow bridge, he disappeared. Loki frowned and asked Heimdall, did he tell you where the destination is? Heimdall slapped his head and said, oh no, I forgot to ask him. Loki raised his eyebrows and said, poor Link, you're on your own. Bang. A ray of light that penetrated the sky and the earth suddenly descended on a farm, and a circle of ancient patterns was engraved on the field. The light faded, revealing a confused Link. He said in annoyance, I forgot to tell Heimdall the destination. He looked at the brilliant starry sky outside. New York would never have such a clean night sky. Where is this? Africa? If so, you can go to Wakanda to get some vibranium. Who is it? Don't move. I have a gun in my hand. A nervous voice came from behind. Link sounded familiar and was immediately happy. It was English. At least he didn't fall into a country where he couldn't speak the language. Turning around, he saw a house behind him. The door was open and bright, and a figure was standing in front of the door, with his head down, and a gun pointed at Link. Obviously, he thought Link was a thief. Link's eyes adjusted to the darkness, and he could see the man's appearance clearly. He was slightly surprised. What a coincidence. So he waved and shouted, "Ethan. Long time no see, I'm Link. Please subscribe." Now it's a paid chapter. I won't say too much in the text to waste everyone's money. Move the message here. Mistin is a divine artifact in Norse mythology. You can add some fun functions to Link, and you will know later. People like to read fanfiction. Maybe there is a reason that can save the tragedy of the original characters. Ethan is living a good life. Chapter 103, White Learning Moment. Link. The owner of this farm is Tona's savior and fellow sufferer, the good man Ethan. When he saw Link waving at him, his shoulders twitched. Years of dangerous life made him a little sensitive, and he almost shot out. Hearing Link's voice, he couldn't help wondering, why is Link here? So he took out a gun in one hand and a flashlight in the other, and shone it at Link. Link's eyes were pierced by the strong light and he blocked the light with his arm. Although Link blocked his eyes with his arm, Ethan would not mistake his iconic long ears and brilliant blonde hair. Although Link hadn't seen Ethan for a long time, but Ethan often saw Link on TV, flying around on a shield. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief and was about to put down his gun when he suddenly caught a glimpse of a shadow floating above and behind Link. Blood red. It's a ghost. Ethan mistook Mipha, who was in soul state, for a ghost. Ghost. He cried out, and his index finger pulled the trigger subconsciously, and a bullet was fired. When Ethan reacted, he realized the direction of the bullet, which was aimed at Link. Link heard the gunshot, and couldn't help wondering, didn't Ethan recognize me? He skillfully took out the vibranium shield from the weapon space, and blocked it with his backhand. Tap. The bullet bounced back. Link didn't perform a perfect shield counter. Ethan would have died if he had, and rushed to the cow shed. The cow groaned, and the bullet killed a cow in the shadow. The other cows fell into chaos. Link was a little depressed. Ethan, it's really me. Although he couldn't hurt him, Link was still a little unhappy about being shot. Ethan hurriedly threw away the gun. Even if he could recognize the face, Ethan had a clear memory of the familiar shield counter. Link walked over. Ethan apologized. "I'm sorry, Link. I was frightened. But, what is that on your head?" "Ah." Mipha pointed at herself, a little sad. "Am I scary?" She was a little sad. "Maybe. I look weird in the eyes of humans." Mipha was about to shrink back into Link's body sadly. Link hurriedly said, "This is Mipha. Someone like me." Ethan was relieved and apologized to Mipha solemnly. Then he led the two into the house. Link briefly told his experience. Ethan nodded with a warm smile that was full of experience. Although he felt it was amazing, he did not ask in detail. For Ethan, myths, battles, and planets were not as important as the arrival of a friend who had not seen him for a long time. So he smiled and said, "You stay for a while, I will prepare dinner for you." There was a TV in the living room. Although Tony gave Ethan a large sum of money, Ethan still lived a simple life and the TV was small. Link's missing person notice was playing in a loop. Tony offered a huge reward for Link's whereabouts, and the amount of the reward was enough to buy Zaya away. Link borrowed Ethan's phone and called Zelda first, but he couldn't get through to Zelda after calling her several times. So Link continued to call Tony, and after the call was connected, Jarvis's calm voice came. "Hello, what can I do for Mr. Tony?" Link smiled and said, "Jarvis, I'm back." Mipha looked at the TV curiously. "Great. Zelda will definitely be very happy." Although he said so, Jarvis' tone was always calm. Tony answered the phone in a hurry and just said, "Link, where are you?" Then there was a bang sound, as if Tony was pushed away, and then Zelda's hoarse voice came. "Link, Link, hey, I'm here." Link said with a smile, "I'm fine. I'm in New Mexico. I made you worry." "Great. I'm glad you're okay." Zelda choked, and in the background came the quarrel between Tony and Peppa. "I want to answer the phone." "Brave master," Peppa shouted, and Tony seemed to be desperately holding Peppa. "Little bully, don't bother others." Link smiled. When Mipha heard Zelda's voice, she was suddenly stunned and remembered that she hugged Link in Jotunheim and expressed her feelings. Then her face flushed, her whole body flushed, and she was a little flustered. Link tried his best to comfort Zelda. Then Zelda asked tentatively, "How is Mipha?" Link asked Mipha to come over, handed her the phone, and said, "This is a mobile phone. You can contact people far away. The person on the other side is Zelda. She is asking you." Mipha said in a panic, "Princess, Grandpa." Zelda was caught off guard and heard Mipha's voice and replied in a panic, Me Mipha." The two talked awkwardly. Link helped Mipha hold the phone and his nose suddenly twitched and he smelled a very fragrant smell. Link had a keen sense of smell and he knew without looking that it was the smell of Ethan cooking steak. And just when Link's attention was focused on the steak, Mipha and Link talked awkwardly. Mipha thought in her heart, "What should I do? Obviously Link likes the princess more." Zelda had the same reaction in her heart. "I'm sleeping with Link. How can I face Mipha?" The two girls each thought that they were the redundant party. So the conversation after 100 years seemed particularly awkward. It didn't last long. Link took the phone and Zelda said, "I'll go there tomorrow with Tony and Peppa. Go to bed early." Link hummed, said goodnight to each other, and hung up the phone. Link looked at the map in Ethan's living room. New Mexico? Link didn't think for long, and Ethan brought a sumptuous steak. This steak was made from the cow that was killed by Link's shield bullet. Ethan knew Link's horrible appetite, so he prepared a lot. He was also very considerate and prepared a portion for Mipha. It was a pity that the fish princess couldn't enjoy it. Of course, the extra food was not wasted, and it all went into Link's stomach. Hammer? Ethan and Link were chatting. When Link asked about Thor's hammer, Ethan nodded. Yes, there was a hammer falling down on a highway nearby, making the surrounding area look like a meteorite crater. No one could lift the hammer, and they even held a competition. But recently, the government has blocked that area. It was late at night. Link took a tired shower and fell asleep at Ethan's house. Beside Link's bed, Mipha looked at him gently, as if she couldn't get tired of him. He and Ethan agreed to go to a nearby city tomorrow. There he would meet Zelda and Tony. Maybe he could see Thor running around like an ancient man. Ethan looked at the movement outside the door. The night sky was still calm, without even a meteor. He then locked the door and turned off the lights cautiously. Nothing happened that night. I was also asking for trouble. I didn't save any drafts and still boasted. I wrote these chapters all by staying up late. Thank you all for your subscriptions and monthly tickets. Thank you Lily Aquarius for the 100 starting coins reward. Thank you all for your generous support. Chapter 104 God Comes to Earth. The next morning, Link sat in Ethan's old car and was sent to the city. The car was really old, like it was from the 1950s. Ethan also looked simple, and he didn't look like a multimillionaire at all. Ethan, who was dead in the original time and space, was now sitting next to Link, talking and laughing about the details of his life here. This made Link feel a little emotional. The climate here is dry, there are few people and a lot of land, and it took Ethan an hour to drive to the city. There are not many people in the city, and there are dozens of lonely houses, like a small island in the sea. Mipha also shrank back into Link's body in order not to scare the residents here. Link and Ethan stood in the hot sun, waiting for them at the place Tony agreed. Unfortunately, Link did not see Thor, Hawkeye Coulson and other SHIELD personnel. Just as Link was eating the 10th hamburger as a snack, the roar of an airplane came from the sky. The pedestrians around covered their foreheads with their hands and looked up at the dazzling sky. Then they saw a black helicopter, sounding the alarm in the sky and falling rapidly. The pedestrians around them quickly dodged. The helicopter's propeller swept a circle of dust and stopped in the middle of the road. The door of the plane opened, and Tony, wearing a neat suit and dark glasses, walked down the helicopter in a very coquettish manner. Then he was hit on the waist by Peppa behind him, staggered, and almost fell. Peppa and Zelda ran down, looked around, and soon saw Link waving his hand and smiling, and ran over to hug Link. "I'm fine." Link hugged Zelda and turned around, then put her down. Zelda's complexion was not very good, her lips were a little pale, and her shiny golden hair was a little dull. It was obvious that she had not been doing well in the past few days when Link was missing. "Great. You're okay." When I saw you disappear, I ran madly to the place where you disappeared, looked for you everywhere, knelt down and cried. Well, Peppa and I cried together. We were all scared. Zelda could still remain calm over the phone. But once they met, she couldn't control her emotions. The battle with Ganon Pollution, who possessed Ivan, was too tragic. Except for the time when he was besieged by the Guardian army, Zelda had never seen Link so embarrassed. Thinking about the scene at that time, Link hung his head, his body was dead, and stood woodenly with a sword stuck in Ivan's chest. Zelda still felt cold all over. Everyone looked at them curiously. Zelda and Link both wore hats, so they didn't recognize them. But Tony was very flamboyant and didn't hide his thoughts. So when the people recognized Tony and screamed, Tony nodded, waved to the people with a cold face, then came to Ethan, stretched out his arms, and gave Ethan a big hug. Good friend. You live in a very remote place, Tony said. Like Link, Ethan had witnessed Tony's most embarrassing moments and held an extremely important position in Tony's heart. For some reason, Tony had dreamed several times that Ethan was killed to help him delay time. If that was true, Tony felt that he would feel guilty for the rest of his life. What? Thor was exiled by his father? Maybe in this backward town. Several people came to a nearby restaurant. Link talked about what happened when he disappeared, while Peppa struggled with a brown pudding on the table. Zelda knew that Mipha had woken up, so she looked at Link with complicated eyes, pursed her lips, and thought about some girlish thoughts. A middle-aged female waiter brought a plate of food, heard Tony's next words, and glared at him fiercely. Although Tony didn't look at the waiter, he could also sense it, so he didn't tip the waiter. Well, I actually want to believe it. Haha, but you have to know that you are talking seriously about characters in mythology, maybe strolling in this town and eating ice cream. I still want to laugh. Tony put his arm on the top of the back of the chair and saw 3 young girls at the next table grinning at him, so he raised his chin, causing the girls to scream. Ice cream? I want ice cream. Peppa's face was covered with pudding crumbs, and he raised his head and jumped up. Zelda helped Peppa wipe his mouth affectionately and said, I'll take you there later. Tony interrupted, I'll treat you to the local specialty, pepper beef flavored ice cream. Peppa quickly shook his head. Link replied, yeah, I've eaten there, it's good. Zelda whispered, your review is of no reference value. Tony straightened his sleeves and said, okay. Then our current mission is to find Mr. Thor, the poor kid abandoned by his father. Excuse me. Zelda ran to the counter, showing a bright smile, and asked the fierce waiter just now, have you seen a strong, bearded, and weird-talking young man? As a lovely young girl, Zelda's affinity is full. The waiter immediately put on a chubby smile and said, little girl, you've asked the right person. I know everyone who lives in this town. Just yesterday, a few weird climate scientists brought a very masculine strong man to eat here. The man was so happy drinking that he actually smashed the glass. Of course, I didn't ask him to pay for it, because he was handsome. Hehe he cough. The man's eyes are very beautiful. Zelda returned to the table with a bunch of useless information. At this time, Peppa was standing in front of the window. Several children outside were teasing Peppa. Peppa was making faces at them. Link nodded. This information is enough. Thor did come to this town, which means that Thor may have gone to look for the hammer now. The main plot of Thor 1 is very compact, and the main events take place within 2 or 3 days. Link told Tony, and Tony immediately called Carlson. Oh, long time no see. You were injured, but Nick still asked you to carry out the mission. Shield is really a cold and harsh company. If you want, you can come to work in my company. Well, seriously, I know you are studying a hammer and have blocked that place. Has anyone tried to steal the hammer recently? Yes. Bearded, long hair, blue eyes, meaning you have taken a lot of testosterone? That's right. You caught a god. Carlson was still asking hurriedly. Tony said, Link and I will go there later. Then he hung up the phone. Tony stood up, straightened his clothes, and muttered, God has appeared. So the devil can't be far behind, right? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 105 The Red Moon Returns. 5th update. Thor was now tied to a chair, like a majestic statue hit by an axe. Just now, he suffered 2 blows. One was that Mjolnir no longer recognized him, and the other was the death of his father told by his younger brother. Thor, who had gradually become arrogant as he grew up, fell into deep reflection for the first time. He thought that he had hurt his father. The door opened, and 2 men walked in. One of them had the same regrettable hairline as his younger brother. He seemed to have experienced a brutal battle, with scars on his face, and his left arm was wrapped in a bandage, and hung in front of his chest. The other one, with a short haircut and small eyes, was dressed in black. Although he was not tall or strong, he was very imposing. Different from the original plot. Coulson looked at Thor curiously. Thor? Thor raised his head suddenly, his eyes were like a lion, but then sadness overwhelmed his head, making Thor lower his head again tiredly and said, "There is no Thor here, only Thor. How did you know?" Coulson saw Hawkeye sticking his head out to look at him, wearing a pair of processed thick soled rubber shoes, which looked a little funny. Coulson knew that Hawkeye was very worried that Thor's beard would suddenly stand up, explode like a sunflower, and discharge electricity everywhere. Coulson smiled and said, "We have a reliable friend who said he fought with you." Him? Thor immediately guessed that it was Link, raised his head and asked, "Did he return to Midgard?" At this time, several people walked in from the outside and poured into the room, making it a little crowded. Tony rubbed his shoulders and complained to Ethan, "You really should buy a new car. Your current car is so expensive that it should be sent to a humanities museum or a massage parlor." "Is this the god of this world?" Zelda looked curiously and took out a pair of black framed glasses from somewhere. After putting them on, she observed Thor carefully. Then she asked Link with interest, "How interesting. The gods of this world actually look like humans. I always thought they should be like aliens like it, with big heads and thin bodies." Pepper also lay on Zelda's shoulder, supporting his big face with his 2 small hands, and the tentacles on his head swayed back and forth. He gave Thor a disappointed sigh. "This god has no wings. It's not good looking." But out of politeness, Pepper still waved his hand and called tenderly, "Hello, Marvel God." Thor smiled and said, "Little guy, are you a child of the Groot tribe?" Hawkeye saw Link, put his hands on his shoulders, looked him up and down, and sighed, "Thanks to you for that battle." Then he looked at Thor. "This man. How should this god be dealt with?" Thor snapped his fingers and whispered to Coulson, "Do you have some of Thor's body tissue for experiments? This guy seems to have lived for a long time. If you can find his immortality gene, you will make a fortune." Coulson shook his head. Since the Hulk incident, S.H.I.E.L.D. has retreated to the most conservative state in its attitude towards human biological experiments. Thor saw a mess, and a blonde girl took out a small notebook out of curiosity and wrote and drew on it. Thor glanced at a line of English and frowned. "The biological habits of the gods from other worlds." Thor knew Link in the crowd, and he shouted loudly, "Link, tell your men to let me go." Coulson was confused. When did I become Link's men? But out of trust in Link, Coulson lifted the restrictions on Thor. Thor moved his wrists and felt a little discouraged that he was a mortal's tool, but he was a man, god, who could take it and put it down. After stretching his body, he shouted to Link, "Friend, there is a special kind of wine here. I will treat you to a drink later." Thor ignored the fact that he was penniless. Coulson left the temporary base here with a group of messy people. When passing by the location of Thor's hammer, a large piece of wet soil was dug up from the ground. There was a strange human-shaped dent on the soil, and Thor's hammer was placed on it in the center. Everyone present, except Thor, took a look at the hammer. Link thought about it, used the magnetic grabber, and waved his hand. But he controlled Thor's hammer, and in the process of flying, it seemed to hit something, knocked it, and fell into Link's palm. Hawkeye and Coulson opened their eyes wide. "You can actually pick up the hammer?" Thor turned his head away awkwardly. He felt as if he saw his ex-girlfriend and current boyfriend kissing each other. Thor couldn't stand this stimulation. Tony crossed his arms and looked disdainful. "This hammer is not the core of a white dwarf. How heavy can it be?" Thor snorted, his face full of pride like an old father. "Mjolnir, only a true warrior can lift it." Others can't even think about it. After he said this, he was suddenly stunned and felt like crying. He was no longer a true warrior. And Link looked at the empty space in a trance. Although he didn't see it, Link knew that Loki was hiding there. After all, the handle of the hammer was still warm. This brat. Loki rubbed his cheek. He had just tried to pull out the hammer, and when he was trying hard, the hammer suddenly became lighter. He thought he had succeeded, but to his surprise, after great joy came great sorrow. The hammer hit him in the face. Loki dodged quickly, otherwise his 2 front teeth would have been gone. The hammer hit Loki's left cheek hard, and it slipped out of Loki's palm and fell into Link's hand. Loki covered his face and glared at Link with his teeth bared. But then he saw Link's puzzled eyes, scanning the open space. Loki thought he was discovered, but Link didn't take it seriously, as if he didn't notice anything, and left. Loki was stunned for a moment, and kicked the stone pillar under Thor's hammer. At this time, Loki heard a strange voice in his heart. I want to prove myself. Emotions such as resentment, dissatisfaction, fear, disgust, and resentment attacked his heart, and Loki stood still. His eyes seemed to be looking at a fire, flashing strange light, and revealing a bloody red. Pepper was held by Zelda, singing the ballad in the Chloro forest tenderly. Suddenly, he felt Zelda's arms stiffen, and looked up in confusion. He saw that the Princess of Hyrule seemed to be sick. Her face was pale, and she seemed to be able to shake off flour. At the same time, Link also felt this kind of disgust from the heart, and the Thor's hammer in his hand also trembled. He suddenly turned around, and the people behind him almost bumped into each other. Coulson's nose hit the back of Hawke's head, and he vaguely said sorry. Link said to Coulson in a serious tone, the second blood moon is expected to fall tonight. Thank you Minecrafter for the 5,000 starting coins reward. Thank you Lily Water Bottle for the 100 starting coins reward. Thank you for your recommendation tickets and monthly tickets. Thank you everyone. Chapter 106, The Power of the Clone, 6th update. Link heard the goddess Hylia's whispers again in his mind. This whisper is a bit too frequent. Goddess, don't you find it troublesome? Why don't you just give me all the rewards at once? Trial of the Brave. Defeat Ganon's curse. Mission completed. You will gain the power of clones. Link was stunned when he heard it. The power of clones? Link couldn't help but change his expression, because he knew the horror of the power of clones. This is a skill in other Zelda games, not from Breath of the Wild. With this skill, Link will split into multiple clones, just like Naruto in Naruto, splitting himself into multiple selves to join the battle. In this way, Link's strength will increase exponentially. You know, one Link is powerful enough and can even defeat Hulk and Abomination alone. Moreover, this skill can help Link get rid of a weakness, that is, the scarcity of group skills. Link's current range attack only has one kind of thunder power of Zappo, and it consumes a huge amount of energy. If he has the power of clones, multiple Links will join the battle, and his attack range will be greatly increased. The future battle of New York, Ultron, and the upcoming Red Moon will all be filled with enemies one after another. This is where the power of clones, a skill that can improve combat efficiency, comes in handy. He didn't have time to think about it. Tony murmured, Red Moon? Then we have to go back to New York quickly, or New York will be demolished. New York had just experienced the Ivan disaster caused by Ganon pollution, and it became an empty city overnight. People have been pouring into New York again in the past 2 days, and it has just regained some vitality, but the Red Moon has appeared again. Tony expressed deep sorrow for the people of New York who are fighting on the front line of the disaster. No. Zelda shook her head palely and said, the center of this Red Moon disaster should be here. I can feel it. The curse energy of Ganon in other places is still very low, and the curse energy in this area is confirmed to be increasing rapidly. I can clearly feel Ganon's malice. Zelda shook her head. I don't understand what's going on. Thor wanted to say, don't worry, leave these little bastards to me. But he quickly realized that he was already immortal and swallowed the words that came to his throat. Coulson was hurriedly contacting SHIELD. The last Red Moon disaster gave SHIELD and even the world a very terrifying memory. This is even more important than the appearance of a god on Earth. Tony pursed his lips, still with a cynical attitude. He developed a new generation of Iron Man, and Tony wanted to use this wave of monsters in the Red Moon to test his equipment. Zelda and Ganon have been fighting for a full 100 years and are very clear about Ganon's energy fluctuations. She said quickly, I feel that the Ganon curse energy of the entire earth is now transferred to a certain point near here. Why is that? Just when everyone was puzzled, Loki had undergone a great change, and his inner will was not as firm as his brother's. As soon as the voice in his heart came to his mind was polluted by Ganon's will that came out of nowhere. His eyes were red, revealing an ominous darkness. A strange non-human language was transmitted into Loki's mind. Although this language, which was almost like a moan, had no words and no emotions, it was more efficient and clear than any other language in the world. Loki instantly understood the meaning of this strange voice. You are Ganon. You will give me power. You will give me endless puppets. As long as I help you kill Zelda and Link. Loki turned his body and appeared in the nearby wilderness. Under his feet was a dark red ancient spell, glowing, rising, and falling like breathing. In the land, countless blood threads like magma stretched out, climbed up Loki's ankles, and spread throughout his body until it covered his eyes. Loki's body seemed to be covered with a layer of asphalt. Suddenly, a bubble of asphalt appeared in front of him, and it exploded, revealing a huge eyeball without any expression, but looking extremely crazy. Loki, polluted by Ganon's curse. The dirty Ganon's curse on the surface suddenly seemed to fall into the water, sinking into Loki's body and disappearing, revealing Loki's original appearance, but Loki's face was twitching slightly. My minions, appear. In the soil, it suddenly broke open, and countless skeletons, even including a huge cyclops skeleton, appeared in front of Loki. Loki smiled and opened his arms. My subjects. I'm the new king of Asgard. Ha ha ha. Because of the red moon, the sky darkened very quickly today. A round of red moon rose from the distant mountains. Coulson had hurriedly ordered his subordinates to lead the residents of this small town to evacuate, and there was a panic outside. The children who had teased Peppa before were also dragged away by the adults in a hurry. Tony said, since I was attacked by Ivan, I have developed a good habit. That is, I must wear the Iron Man suit when I go out. Hawkeye was packing his bow and arrows and whispered, not bad. All the monsters are concentrated here and they can be eliminated at once. The disaster of the whole world has been reduced to a local disaster. Zelda was still guessing, based on the incident with Ivan. I'm afraid that the Ganon curse will also possess a person. I did feel a concentrated Ganon curse energy. Then she became dizzy, shaky, and fell into Link's arms. Link shouted, Mipha. A light blue flame rose from her body, and a beautiful fishman princess with a red figure floated in front of Link. Link said to Mipha, can you heal the princess? Mipha shook her head. My power of protection can only work on you. Zelda covered her forehead with her hand. There is nothing wrong with my body. It's just because of the red moon. I feel very uncomfortable. There is a strange feeling. I can't explain it. Link picked up Zelda and put her in Ethan's car, took off his coat and covered her. Tony also rushed to the plane to get his battle suit. Thor was chatting with Jane, the girl he quickly became hot with. Jane's partner, the girl named Daisy, was curiously taking pictures of Hawkeye with her mobile phone and asked loudly, why don't you smile? At this time, suddenly a light flashed in the sky and a huge golden armor appeared on the continent. Thor opened his eyes wide. The destroyer? The destroyer walked towards Thor, blocking Tony's helicopter in the middle of the road. The destroyer punched him and his arm was poked into the helicopter at once. At this moment, Tony was still changing clothes in the helicopter. Tony! Link shouted angrily. He threw the Thor's hammer in his hand out. Chapter 107 The Truth Revealed. 7th update. In anger, Link threw the hammer and hit the destroyer's flat head hard. The huge force was enough to smash the iceberg of Jotunheim, and when it hit the destroyer's head armor, it even caused a slight deformation of the helmet. The destroyer pulled his arm out of the helicopter and flew out. But the destroyer's head also released light, and in the blink of an eye, it was about to hit the helicopter. Seeing that Tony was about to be blown to death in it, Link quickly took out Mistin from the weapon space and swung it hard. The mistletoe turned into a long branch and quickly swung it towards the helicopter. Wrapping around the propeller, Link pulled back suddenly, exerting force with one hand, and controlling the magnetic grabber with the other hand, trying his best to control the helicopter. He just threw the helicopter aside from a distance. The light of the destroyer remained unchanged, shooting towards Link. Link took out Captain America's vibranium shield and angrily deflected it. The golden light refracted 180 degrees on the smooth surface of the shield and counterattacked the destroyer, piercing the body of the destroyer, who was already hit in the air by Thor's hammer. Thor shouted, "The destroyer? Why is the destroyer here?" "Thor!" came a shout. The shield agent shouted with a gun, "Who are you?" Thor turned around and knew why the agents were so nervous. Because 4 warriors wearing Nordic battle armor, 3 men and 1 woman, Thor's good partners and comrades, ran over with a nervous look on their faces. These people in the clothes who repeatedly traveled from the Viking Age undoubtedly made the agents very alert. Hogan came over and pointed at the muzzle of the gun on the agent's nose, staring and observing. "Will this tube shoot poison arrows? Like those primitive tribes?" Thor hurriedly shouted to Coulson, "They are my friends." The helicopter fell to the ground with a thud and exploded within 2 seconds. The fully armed Iron Man flew out from the exploded helicopter and shouted in the air, "Who is it? Who messed with me when I was changing clothes?" Link's face was pale. "It's behind you." Tony turned his head and saw a tall golden armor struggling to stand up. Jarvis immediately reported to Tony, "This armor has extremely strong energy. The material cannot be analyzed, and the movement mechanism cannot be analyzed. I'm very sorry." Tony smiled with an old father's expression. "Jarvis, you have to get used to this situation. Sometimes, science can't explain everything." The destroyer stood up, and the hole in his chest that was shot through by his own light was covered with a dark red substance. This is also the reason why Link's face was ugly: cannon pollution. Tony said, "This guy, is he also a monster from Hyrule?" The destroyer faced Tony and shot out a beam of light again. This time, the golden light seemed to be mixed with a few strands of dark red, as if this pure golden light was contaminated by some dirty substance. The polluted light has a faster shooting speed. Tony dodged quickly, and another beam of light attacked. Tony shouted, "Link, why didn't this iron guy attack you, but only me?" Link was not in a good mood, because Zelda was sick, and shouted, "Maybe this iron guy's more compatible with you, an iron guy." Link rushed forward quickly, tied the destroyer's ankles with Mistatin, and pulled it hard, causing it to fall. Thor's hammer was recognized from a distance, circling with lightning and hitting the destroyer's head hard. Thor was so excited that he raised his fist and shouted, "Well done." Then he turned around and asked Sif and the others, "What did you say just now?" Sif's face was very heavy. "You were deceived. The father of the gods is not dead at all. He just fell into a coma. And Loki has stolen the throne now." "What are you talking about?" A voice that made the 4 warriors a little creepy came. Loki turned around and appeared in front of Thor and the 4 warriors. The signature smirk disappeared, and his expression was a little tired, or more accurately dead silent. "Are you planning to betray Asgard? Betray your new king?" Thor yelled, "Brother, what are you doing? Why did you send the destroyer to attack me?" Loki finally smiled a little. "To punish you. Asgard doesn't need an unstable factor like you. And, you are too self-indulgent. The destroyer is not here to attack you, but to attack Link." Thor had fought with Ganon's minions, some vicious frost lizardmen, and he knew very well that there was always a strange red light flashing in the eyes of Ganon's minions. At this time, his brother, the god of mischief Loki, also flashed the strange red light that Thor was very familiar with in his eyes. Thor was furious. "So you have been bewitched by that evil power, Ganon. Bastard." He raised his fist and hit Loki in the face. But Loki stood still and blew a breath of air gently. Thor was immediately knocked to the ground by Loki's breath. Loki sneered, "You are not the god of thunder now, but just a mortal." The 4 Asgardian warriors were furious and rushed over, but Loki, holding the gun, cut off the weapons of the 4 at once. Loki smiled coldly, "This is my first day on the throne. I don't want to kill the people of Asgard. I advise you not to anger your new king." Hawkeye was about to bend his bow and shoot an arrow, but suddenly several lizard skeletons appeared around him and surrounded Hawkeye. Loki smiled and said, "On Earth, there are few powerful warriors like you. At least you are much better than these 4 trash." Loki held Gungnir and hit the back of Tony's head hard, and a divine power penetrated into Thor's body. Thor felt weak all over, as if he was carrying a turtle shell on his back, unable to stand up, and could only roll his eyes and stare at Loki. Loki glanced at Link, who was fighting against the destroyer. In his heart, Ganon's will was screaming, "Kill Link! Kill Link!" But Loki suppressed his inner impulse, and cursed Ganon in his heart, saying, "Shut up. I need to finish my work first. I will destroy Jotunheim to prove that I'm the hero of Asgard in the undisputed nuking. As for Link, my reliable puppets are enough." Although Loki's character is not as firm as Thor's, he still has his own obsession, and even Ganon's curse cannot interfere with him. That is to defeat Thor and seize the coveted throne of Asgard. Loki turned around and disappeared. At the moment he disappeared, the ground began to tremble, and a huge skeleton giant crawled out from under the asphalt slab, as if to lift up this small city. Chapter 108 The Second Zelda. The fight outside was very intense, and Pepper was in Ethan's broken car, using leaves to fan Zelda briskly. "Princess, get well soon. Princess, get well soon." He sang a ballad he made up. There was a muffled vibration outside, but Pepper didn't care. Anyway, the brave Lord and Tony were outside, so he couldn't be asked to take action. Link had arranged for Pepper to take good care of Zelda. Since he was the brave Lord, Pepper was naturally given the most important position. But the vibration coming from behind became more and more serious. Pepper was a little irritated, pouting and looking back. He screamed and trembled with fear, because he saw a super huge monster. A huge skeleton giant, shaking with a crackling skeleton all over his body, walked towards Zelda. Several agents intercepted in front, but were immediately kicked away by the skeleton giant. But the considerate Pepper quickly covered his mouth and looked back at Zelda. Zelda frowned, her eyes clenched, and she fell into a state of semi-consciousness and semi-comatose. It made Pepper feel very distressed. You know, Zelda is usually very energetic, and her big eyes are like a little D looking for interesting things everywhere. Even after Link disappeared, Zelda has never been so depressed as now, which made Pepper feel very depressed. "What should I do?" Exclamation mark. "Brave man, come and save the princess." Pepper drove out to look for Link. As a result, Link was besieged by a large number of skeleton lizardmen, and could not rush out. When he tried to jump up, he was shot down by the precise beam of the destroyer. He fell to the ground with flames all over his body, looking very embarrassed. Link shouted and released the power of thunder, and Mithra on his body was replaced by Zappo. It took a lot of effort to smash the dense circle of skeletons around him into bone powder. Rushing over desperately, the destroyer released a beam to block it, but Link ignored everything and did not stop for a moment. Zappo was replaced by Darkle. Darkle roared, hit the shield, and emitted a beam of light, which blasted away the destroyer's light. Just when Link was desperate and running desperately, and was about to run to Zelda's car, the huge skeleton giant had already come to the front of the car and punched down. Link's shoulder seemed to fall off. He quickly bent his bow and shot an arrow at the head of the Cyclops. Bang! Successfully hit the stiffness. The Cyclops looked up and fell down. And Link also fell down, because he shot the arrow with all his strength, while running at high speed. As a result, something unexpected happened. The Cyclops actually removed his arm, aimed at the car where Zelda was, and threw it. Link shouted wildly, "Princess! Try to reach forward." Pepper looked left and right and found that only he could protect Princess Zelda. Without hesitation, he flew out of the window. Although he was not wearing the small Iron Man suit, he was still very scared, afraid of death and pain, but he always remembered the task Link had given him. He stretched out his hands and tried to block the huge arm bone that was swinging down. The small figure was about to be covered by a big shadow. Pepper was so scared that he closed his eyes, and Link almost stopped breathing. At this time, Zelda's body burst out with strong light, and her whole body turned into a statue made of jade. This generation of golden and white holy light shone straight into the dark sky through the roof. We are very resistant to being hit. Pepper bravely closed his eyes and used his hands to block the huge arm bone. But after 3 seconds, Pepper didn't feel anything hitting him. Could it be that the goddess Hylia saw that I was so brave and gave me a blessing, and my hands burst out with strong power and shook the arm bone away? Pepper opened his eyes. There was a slender figure in front of him. The first thing that caught his eye was his beautiful long golden hair, which was as delicate as silk and must be very comfortable to touch. The man pointed his sword to the sky, and 2 huge arm bones fell to the ground. Ethan's broken car and Zelda inside the broken car were not hurt. Brave man. Pepper's first reaction was that the figure blocking his way was Link. But Link's hair was not that long, nor that beautiful, and although Link liked to use swords, he didn't like to wear skirts. Ah! Link shouted, use the bomb to detonate the shield, tiptoed, flew over, and spun desperately in the sky. Carrying Link's rage, lightning lingered on the hammer and hit the skull of the skeleton giant with one blow. With a click, it broke into pieces and collapsed into a piece of broken bones. Link knelt on the ground and gasped. He turned his head with a pair of incredible blue eyes and looked at the blonde woman who was slowly descending from the sky. Link, we finally meet. The blonde smiled faintly. Link was stunned. The girl in front of him was tall, with long hair down to her waist. She wore a crown of thorns on her head, held a rapier, and wore a light and simple thin armor. Underneath was a pale pink palace dress with the pattern of the Triforce. Like Zelda, she was a very beautiful young woman, but compared to Zelda, who looked like a girl next door, this woman had a more obvious royal temperament. She had a beautiful face. Although she held a long sword, her every move was very elegant, and she never overstepped the line. In that noble air of superiority, there was also a hint of sharpness. Although she was obviously very happy to see Link, the blonde still only smiled faintly, with a little arc on her small red lips. Unlike Zelda, who smiled with her eyebrows, eyes, and mouth, this blonde woman was very restrained in her emotions. This completely confused Link, because this girl was also Princess Zelda. The Zelda game series has more than a dozen games, spanning decades. The character and image of the protagonist Link has never changed, and he has always been an adventurous brave boy. But Princess Zelda has changed significantly in almost every version. The image is different, and the character is also different. The woman in front of Link is Zelda from Zelda Warriors, the only super hardcore princess who can go to the battlefield with weapons and kill enemies like mowing grass without Link's rescue. This is the most beautiful Zelda princess in the Zelda game series. To distinguish her from the Zelda in the Breath of the Wild version, she will be referred to as the unparalleled princess below. Pepper, huh? He tilted his head in confusion. Perhaps it was because of the appearance of the unparalleled princess. Zelda's pain caused by the red moon was much lighter, and she heard the noise outside and came out to check. At this time, the unparalleled princess also turned her head and looked at Zelda. This is the princess in Zelda Warriors, the most beautiful Zelda in all versions. What do you think of my idea of adding princesses from other versions? This decision is a bit risky, so I'm going to ask for your opinions. If you're not satisfied, I'll make some adjustments. Feel free to leave your comments. Chapter 109 Thundergod Awakens. 9th update. Zelda's face froze. Who are you? The Washang princess said naturally. I'm Zelda. Zelda said angrily. You are Zelda. Then who am I? The Washang princess glanced at Link. You and I are not the same person in the same time and space. A brave man who should have been protecting me has never appeared, so I can only come to find him myself. The Washang princess blinked and gave Link a reproachful look. Unlike Zelda's forget-me-not-like girl next door, the Washang princess is more exposed and beautiful, like bright lavender. The look she gave Link was not so much a reproach, but also a strange emotion. Link's heart was pounding. At this time, the broken skeleton behind Link suddenly flew into the sky, and with the eyeball as the center, it gathered again into a white behemoth. Link was holding Thor's hammer and was alert. Princess Washang came over, looked at Link's face, and said softly, I have seen your appearance in my dreams countless times, but you never came to see me. So I prayed to Goddess Hylia, and Goddess Hylia told me that you needed help, so I came from another time and space to find you. Princess Washang looked at the tall Cyclops skeleton and said, I have practiced swordsmanship hard, and finally I can help you. Link nodded. He was tongue-tied and couldn't find anything to say to Princess Washang at this time, but Zelda was Zelda after all. In less than 2 minutes, Link had accepted Princess Washang, as if the two had lived together for more than 10 years. Link rushed forward quickly, threw Thor's hammer, and smashed it into the eyeballs of the Cyclops skeleton. The Cyclops skeleton had learned to be much smarter. He quickly covered it with his arms, raised his foot bones, and stepped hard on Link. Link jumped high. The Washang princess dodged by jumping lightly, then shouted softly, and drew a light blue sword energy. Crack. Cut off the leg bone of the Cyclops skeleton, and the Cyclops skeleton lost its center of gravity and fell down. Link stepped on the shield, detonated the bomb, and quickly reached the height of Thor's hammer. He held the hammer and hit the eyeball whose diameter was longer than Link's height. The only weakness of the Cyclops skeleton was the dry eyeball. Naturally, he covered it with his hand. But the Cyclops skeleton, he first underestimated the power of Thor's hammer, and secondly underestimated Link's anger. If it weren't for the appearance of the Washang princess, Zelda might have died tragically at the hands of this big skeleton monster. Even if nothing happened, Link felt guilty for not being able to protect Zelda. At this moment, his heart was hit by this heavy sense of responsibility. If he didn't clean up this big guy, Link would be uncomfortable for the rest of his life. Ha. Let's fight. Blue flames burst out from Link's body, and Ark appeared behind him with a loud roar. Link's face turned pale, and he swung his hammer down suddenly, with lightning lingering on the hammer. It gave the Asgardian warriors who were fighting against endless skeletons in other places an illusion. It seemed as if Link was the real Thor, and Thor was still lying on the ground, unable to move. He was remorseful in his heart, wanting to apologize to his father, wanting to save his misguided brother, and wanting to save the residents of Asgard. Then Link and Ark shouted. Boom. The Cyclops skeleton crossed its arms to prevent Link's hammer. Even so, it still had no effect. The lightning Thor's hammer, which fell at high speed, disintegrated and collapsed like powder when it touched the arm bone. In an instant, the two thick arms were shaken into powder under the heavy blow, and it almost did not play a role in blocking Link's hammer. Link's attack continued unabated. His eyes were filled with anger. He smashed the Cyclops skeleton with all his strength. Just one strike. Link was too lazy to deal with him. He just wanted to destroy it with one strike. Let his broken skeleton never heal again. Bang, the hammer hit the withered eyeball, and the two came into contact. Time seemed to pause for half a second. Half a second later, as if there was no process, the eyeball turned into a group of exploding fragments, reflecting the flashing lightning on Link's hammer. The Washang princess looked up at Link, and smiled in her heart. Then the sword light turned cold, and it made an arc, and the sky was full of sword light, flying towards the skeletons coming from all directions. The surrounding skeletons fell to the ground like wheat. And the Washang princess, she didn't mess up a strand of hair, and she was always calm. As the Zelda in the Washang version, the Washang princess's group battle ability is extremely outstanding, even better than Link. The combat range was extremely wide, not only around her and Link, but also the skeletons in Zelda, Pepper, and the Asgard warriors were all cleared. The high efficiency made Sif, the only female warrior in Asgard, admire her very much, and wanted to approach her several times. Zelda, who was watching her from afar, felt a little envious. She also wanted to help Link in this way, instead of just being protected by Link. Her name is also Zelda. She said that she came from a world, Zelda said to herself, and then asked, Pepper, do you think what she said is credible? Pepper was held in Zelda's arms, staring at the unparalleled princess with her eyes, clearing the skeleton monsters, and shouting oh, as she watched, as if a rookie was seeing a top player playing a game. For a moment, Pepper didn't even hear what Zelda said, which made Zelda even more frustrated. Just as Link broke and disintegrated the Cyclops' skeleton, the goddess Hylia's murmur came to his mind again. Complete the hero's trial. Obtain a heart container. Link's life bar popped again, and a red heart appeared. At this time, while others fought bravely, Thor could only lie on the ground, and could not move. In this helpless situation, Thor awakened his power of the god of thunder. Lightning flashed on Thor's body, and both eyes projected white and blue light. Tony stood up suddenly, and waved his hand. Mjolnir in Link's hand suddenly struggled desperately, just like a girl who suddenly changed her mind from another man's arms, and ran towards her old love. Thor's hammer fell into Thor's hands. Lightning flashed on Thor's body, and he spun the hammer in the air and threw it out. His body flew over with the hammer and hit the destroyer who was fighting with Tony. I'm the son of Odin. Thor, the god of thunder. A long streak of lightning remained behind Thor, spinning in the air. His armor and cloak from battle instantly appeared. He swung his hammer with a backhand, infusing it with a large amount of lightning power. He aimed at the destroyer's head and chopped it down fiercely. Chapter 110, The Beginning of the War. The 10th update. Please subscribe. Tony and the destroyer were fighting back and forth, spraying beams at each other. For a moment, neither could do anything to the other. Suddenly, Tony felt a stream of air rushing past him, followed by a large number of electric arcs, which scared him. Jarvis, are we leaking electricity? Jarvis's calm voice came. On the contrary, the energy value of the suit has become full. Ding. Thor's hammer hit the top of the destroyer's head, desperately pouring the electricity in his body into the destroyer's body. He could feel that the destroyer was invaded by the cannon pollution, and the damage caused by Thor was repaired by the cannon pollution very quickly. In this regard, Thor did not give up, but injected stronger electricity. Snap. The destroyer instantly disintegrated and broke into pieces, and the cannon pollution inside was instantly purified by lightning. Thor shouted while holding the hammer. The sound resounded throughout the entire plane. His comrades, in order to celebrate Thor's regaining power, also shouted together. Link had no weapons, so he drew out Mistidin, turned it into a long sword, jumped down, turned around, and thrust out the blade, then stabbed 4 skeletons. Not far away, Princess Washang killed a bunch of skeleton puppets with a spinning slash. The sword energy was flowing, making Princess Washang look cool and handsome. Princess Washang came over and said, "You can't do that. The combat efficiency is too low." Link could also do a large-scale spinning slash like Princess Washang, clearing a large area at once. But he needed too long to charge up, and the range was far less than that of Princess Washang. Princess Washang smiled and said, "Why don't I teach you? Come on." She stepped forward and got close to Link. The distance between the two was very close, and he could see all the details of her face under the dark red moon. Link found that Princess Washang's face was very red. Maybe it was an illusion. After all, she still looked very calm, but her breathing was a little rapid. Princess Washang held Link's wrist and glanced at him. "You are a little thin. Have you eaten well?" Then the two of them started to spin on the battlefield full of bones, as if dancing. Princess Washang looked at Link's chest and whispered, "You should guide your power outward. This is a trick. It is not easy, but I believe it will not be difficult for you." The two of them spun violently, and the long sword in Link's hand drew an arc, spreading out, and defeated the monsters in a circle around him. Princess Washang opened her mouth slightly. "Ah, not bad. Do it again." The two of them spun together closely, and Princess Washang dodged her eyes, as if nothing had happened, avoiding close contact with Link's eyes. Although the atmosphere between the two was sweet and strange, the monsters around them suffered. Link unlocked a large-scale spinning attack, and suddenly became the nightmare of these skeletons. Every time he slashed, a large number of skeletons fell down. Then, the goddess Hylia's whispers appeared in Link's mind again. Complete the hero's trial. Learn the spin slash. Obtain an energy container. Link immediately felt his strength increase again. The sudden increase in strength made Link's hands a little careless, and he accidentally pulled the Washang princess into his arms. The Washang princess screamed, hurriedly retreated, tidied her hair, and pretended to be indifferent and said, "It seems that you have learned it." Then she smiled, like a blooming flower. "Did you just do it on purpose?" Link shook his head awkwardly. At this time, the skeleton monsters had been completely wiped out by Thor, Link and Washang princess with full firepower. Zelda walked up to Link and said, "Something is wrong. Ganon's curse power gathered from all over the world. Can't be just this little." Thor walked over, looked at the sky, and said, "The remaining curse power was taken to Asgard by my stupid brother." Thor looked at Link seriously. "I know you have been chasing Ganon. Are you willing to go back to Asgard with me to destroy the power of Ganon's curse?" Link nodded, and the Washang princess beside him took Link's hand. "I will go with you." Zelda walked up to Link and hugged him, saying, "You have to be careful." Then she said to the Washang princess, "Please protect Link in the other world." She looked at Link again and said to Mipha in Link's body, "Mipha, please protect Link." Mipha floated out like a ghost, smiled, and said, "Of course." Soon she saw the Washan princess standing very close to Link. As a girl, Mipha saw at a glance that Link and the Washan princess had an unusual relationship and asked hurriedly, "Who is this?" Princess Washan introduced herself. "My name is Zelda." Mipha. Several people came to the teleportation location, namely the 4 warriors of Asgard, Thor, Link, Princess Washan, Tony, Asgard. Interesting. I must go. Peppa. If Tony goes, I will go too. Hawkeye. Thor was calling Heimdall, and Coulson was complaining to Hawkeye, "Why did you leave your work and run away?" Hawkeye said, "I'm not good at organizational work, and they don't need me." At this moment, Heimdall was attacked by Loki and sealed into an ice pillar. Loki pretended to surrender and led the frost giant leader Laufey to Asgard to kill Odin. On the surface, this is the case. According to Odin's previous story, Loki has determined that Laufey is his biological father. But Loki did not have the joy of seeing his biological father and only wanted to kill him and destroy Jotunheim. Become a hero who saves Odin and Asgard, hoping that his status in the eyes of his father and mother can be higher than his brother. He would not hesitate to kill his biological father for this, even at the cost of destroying his own race. The Ganon curse in Loki's body was roaring and accusing Loki of not listening to orders and not hitting the power to kill Link. But Loki is a god after all. The Ganon curse has seriously disturbed his mind, but it still cannot stop Loki from doing what he has to do even at the cost of his life. At this moment, the ice on Heimdall's body broke. He shouted and chopped down 2 frost giants. He heard Thor's voice, and with the last bit of strength, he inserted the big sword into the sword slot. The rainbow bridge is open. Suddenly there was a thunder in the sky, and a colorful light fell. The few people standing on the imprint disappeared in an instant. Zelda prayed silently for everyone. Heimdall saw many people walking out of the rainbow bridge, some of whom he knew and some of whom he didn't know. He immediately spit out a mouthful of blood in frustration. No wonder it was so tiring to teleport. Heimdall greeted Link. "Boy, we meet again." He complained in his heart, "Why are you here again? Do you think I'm a bus?" Princess Washan looked at the fairy palace and whispered, "Such a strong curse power. This battle looks like it will be very difficult. I'm begging you to subscribe." Without any more manuscripts, I have updated 10 chapters a day. This is my limit. Please subscribe. What is more painful than hard work is that you don't get any reward after hard work. Thank you to all the lovely readers who have always supported me. Thank you. Chapter 111 The Destroyed World. Thor did not hesitate, spun his hammer, and flew towards Asgard. Tony followed closely behind, wearing a mask, looking at the Asgard that was getting closer, and said to himself, "Alien Palace? You can come here for vacation, when you are free." Thor smiled and said, "Sure. After this battle, I will hold a big banquet in Asgard and drink with you." As for Link and others, they stayed with Heimdall. Link stopped them from entering Asgard. Anyway, according to the plot, Loki still had to come back here and use the rainbow bridge to destroy Jotunheim. Peppa lay on Link's shoulder and looked at the Washan princess curiously. Washan princess smiled and reached out to touch the 2 tentacles on Peppa's head. Peppa called tenderly, "Are you Zelda too?" Washan princess said, "Yes, I'm Zelda from another world." Mipha, who was floating beside Link, also asked Link quietly, "What's the matter with this girl?" Link briefly explained the matter. The fishman princess felt her heart wrinkle again. She couldn't even fight Zelda. Now there's another one. The Washan princess looked up at the sky and said in a deep voice, "Something is coming. I can feel the power of Ganon's curse." A man wearing a double-horned helmet was running on the bridge, and there was a little golden figure chasing behind him. Link could see that it was Loki and Iron Man chasing one after the other. Link and the Washan princess, holding swords, stood on the bridge like a perfect couple. Loki ran into Link and the Washan princess, and the roar of Ganon's curse suddenly sounded in his mind. "Kill them. Kill them." Loki gritted his teeth and said, "Shut up. Wait until I destroy Jotunheim." The Ganon's curse suddenly pierced into Loki's soul world. He screamed, his voice full of chaos, and his hand unconsciously pulled the reins hard, causing the horse to neigh and stand upright. throwing the second prince of Asgard to the ground. Loki tore off his beloved double-horned helmet and screamed. His body left many trembling after images. The power of Ganon's curse was rapidly eroding Loki's mind. Link and Princess Washang looked at each other in silence. They wanted to join forces to stop Loki and waited in front of the bridge, but they didn't expect Loki to fall off his horse in front of them and roll on the ground as if he was poisoned. Link. Loki stood up. His face was stained by the rapidly twisting Ganon, a ball of dirty blood. His raised features twisted evilly, and he opened his mouth and roared, "Remember me?" Zelda whispered. It's Ganon's voice. Link walked forward, and Mytha whispered, "Come on, I will protect you." Iron Man landed behind Link and shouted, "Link, be careful. The gun in this guy's hand is not easy to deal with." Just now, he almost pierced a hole in his brother's chest. Under Loki's feet, dark red ripples suddenly released and suddenly turned into a black void black hole, and many creepy screams came from it. Pa. A dark green sticky big palm suddenly stretched out. From the dark void, a toad-shaped giant with a half-rotten body and two horns crawled out, carrying Loki on his shoulders, and standing out of the black hole. Boom. The bridge was shaking. The giant was so huge that the bridge seemed very narrow. The black hole continued to release many dark red short and strong monsters, making shrill noises and holding broadswords and shields. There were so many of them that they filled the bridge. Some of them could not stand and climbed on the giant's feet. Some of them were pushed down and hit by their companions. Tony opened his mask and curled his lips. Is this a hybrid of Pokemon and humans? Princess Washang had a deep disgust on her face. It was these guys who killed many of my people. The big guys called King Dodongo. Loki roared wildly, and the sound even scared Thor, who was flying over. Thor muttered to himself, his body falling down. My brother. How could he become like this? Tony thought of Ivan, who was demonized by Ganon, and shrugged. He was possessed by some disgusting thing. He closed the mask, and an electronic voice came out. We must defeat Loki quickly, otherwise, your baby brother may never be saved. The Washang princess said to Link, I came here for another reason. In my world, there has been no hero to save it, so it was destroyed. Link looked at the Washang princess in shock. The Washang princess looked at Loki with hatred and continued in a steady tone. After Ganon destroyed the world, he suddenly disappeared with his many minions. He left me a broken world. I was told by the goddess Hylia that Ganon came to this time and space to have a final battle with you, Link. For revenge, I rushed here. The Washang princess spoke with a little tremor in the last few words, looked at Link with moist eyes, and said in a hoarse voice, why didn't you come to save me? Link seemed to have suffered a heavy blow in the chest. He didn't expect that the time and space when Zelda was invincible had been destroyed by Ganon. Princess Washang tried to control her emotions. I'm not blaming you, but I envy Zelda, who is in the same time and space as you. Let's fight. Princess Washang took a step forward, and a trembling sound like the sound of wind came from the blade. Her 3-meter wide sword energy suddenly pierced out, cutting through the air and sweeping towards the red-skinned monster in front. Leaving Link with a lonely back, he rushed towards Loki. Link. Mytha called softly. Link quickly reacted and ran forward. Pepper sat on Link's shoulder and shouted, Second Princess, I'm here to help you. Iron Man pointed his hands at the monster pile and sneered, your human wave tactics should have been eliminated in the era of hot weapons. Both hands released light and swept across. Thor's eyes never left Loki, and he swung his hammer and flew forward. But King Dodongo turned his head and aimed at Thor, opened his mouth, and sprayed dark green flames, instantly swallowing Thor. After Princess Washang defeated the first wave of red-skinned monsters, she saw that the black hole behind King Dodongo had not subsided. 2 black air currents swirled out and condensed into human shapes. 2 cold red armored warriors came out, holding spears, wearing smooth red armor, beetle shells, and a helmet shaped like goat horns on their heads. The warriors were pale, and their whole bodies exuded a ferocious and ominous aura. Link rushed to Princess Washang, raised his hand and shot 2 arrows, each of which pierced through 2 red-skinned monsters. With this test, Link immediately realized the strength of these red-skinned monsters, which was basically twice that of Pokebulin. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. we cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 112, The Feeling of Being Protected. The characters and monsters in this article are all from the Zelda series of games. I think the fewer characters created by fan works, the better. The Washan princess said, those two are the burning fierce warrior Volga. They killed him. The sword shook, and the Washan princess quickly jumped high. The sword blade carried a strong sword light and hit the bridge, scattering in all directions, knocking down a row of red-skinned monsters. Although angry and moving at high speed, the Washan princess always maintained an elegant posture, and the posture of drawing the sword was extremely beautiful. The two Volga saw the Washan princess and stabbed at her with their spears. They didn't even care about the red-skinned monsters in front of them, and directly penetrated the bodies of the red-skinned monsters, stabbing Zelda with a string of screaming creatures. A dark red spear light stabbed out like a venomous snake, which made people feel uncomfortable from a distance. The Washan princess's golden and white sword light collided with the two spear lights of the burning fierce knight Volga. The delicate face turned pale, and the sword light was rapidly disintegrating by the cursed power. In just the first confrontation, the Washan princess was at a disadvantage. The Volga in the Marvel world seemed to be much stronger than the Volga in the Zelda Washan world. Just when she felt exhausted, a voice came from her ear, "Don't force it." She only felt the heat on her shoulder. Link came over and held his hand on the fair and tender wrist of the Washan princess, just as the Washan princess taught Link to release the sword energy. The wrist felt warm. Although Link practiced swordsmanship for many years, he had no calluses on his palm because of his unique and excellent skin. Then, the rapier in the hands of the Washan princess was infused with Link's power, and the light shone brightly, releasing a stronger sword light. It overwhelmed the two Volga at once. Through the wrist, Link felt the Washan princess's arms relax. In the Washan princess's faint words, he knew what happened in the Zelda Washan world. Link felt very distressed for this princess who was the only one to go to the battlefield with a sword. He was not good at speaking, so he just said, "I will protect you." Then he stood in front of the Washan princess. He drew out his Mistidin sword and rushed to fight against the two Volga warriors. Peppa jumped onto the shoulder of the Washan princess with a boo. The Washan princess looked at Peppa with a smile and asked, "Is this the feeling of being protected? I haven't felt it for a long time since Impa died." The Washan princess found that she had become much weaker all of a sudden. Seeing Link fighting with the two Volga, she always felt that everything should be left to him, and she should just stand there and watch and wait for Link to return victoriously. No. The Washan princess shook her head, and her long ears scraped Peppa's belly, and Peppa giggled. She gripped the hilt of the sword tightly. "I said, I'm here to help you." Link raised his sword to meet the two fierce warriors. Dap. With a sweep of his wrist, the two swords pushed away the stabbing spears. Link reached out and released the sword energy to attack the face of one of the Volga. Another Volga turned his spearhead and swept it from bottom to top, aiming at Link's chin. Tap. Link summoned the vibranium shield, and the bullet bounced back from the tip of the spear. Another Volga was hit in the face by the sword light, and he roared and flew backwards, but he still did not forget to stab in the air, shooting out a powerful spear light. Shield counter. Vibranium shields are useful. Link used the shield counter again, and the spear light was hit back, hitting the Volga's chest armor hard, piercing a hole, and revealing his skinny chest. This Volga looked like a dried corpse that had not eaten for 100 years. Link heard the sound of turbulent airflow in his ears, followed by the noise of energy gathering. He turned his head and the Washan princess summoned a bow of light in her hand. An arrow composed of pure light energy flew out, piercing through the air, whistling and stabbing into the body of the Volga with a hole in the chest armor. Volga's face suddenly showed a bewildered look, and then, the curse power that supported his body's movement collapsed under the light arrow of the Washan princess. Volga collapsed into a ball of dust in an instant. The Washan princess smiled and said, "Link, don't underestimate me." She looked at the demonized Loki standing high above King Dodongo and howling to the sky, and said to Link, "Your opponent is him. Leave these minions to me." with her skirt flying and her hair swaying in the wind like willow branches. The Washang princess swept a sword, and a row of red-skinned monsters that rushed over quickly turned into black ashes and died on the spot. Peppa stood on the Washang princess's shoulder and waved to Link. "Oh, brave master. I will protect the second princess." Link nodded, then stepped on the shield and jumped up, and the bomb exploded, reaching King Dodongo's head. Just when he reached the height in front of King Dodongo suddenly opened his mouth and spit out a ball of dark green flames. Link was in the air, unable to dodge. In a hurry, he remembered his skill, Ice Maker. He opened his hands, and the air around him suddenly became cold. Since there was a sea below, there was a lot of moisture in the air. He opened his hands and turned into a large piece of solid ice, blocking himself from the dark green flames. The flames were blocked, and Link jumped to the top of King Dodongo's head. He saw Thor being stepped on by Loki. Obviously, under the power of Ganon's curse and the blessing of Gungnir, Thor barely lost to his brother. Loki pointed a gun at Thor's head and shouted, "Why do you think I did this? I want to prove myself. I want to gain your respect. I will destroy Jotunheim and become the hero of Asgard. Just watch." Thor shouted, "We can't rashly destroy race because of this kind of thing. Brother, wake up. Get rid of the dirty power in you." Loki shouted, "What made you so cowardly? What did you experience on Earth? I think it's your mind that needs to be sober." Under the interference of Ganon's curse power, Loki lost control of his emotions and actually aimed at Thor's head, releasing Gungnir's very destructive and powerful divine power. As soon as Link fell, he saw the scene of fratricide. Without thinking, he threw out the shield, spinning between the hair, and inserted it between Gungnir's attack and Thor's head. The light shot at the surface of the vibranium shield, and its special material slowed down a lot of energy. Even so, the shield was also hit by Gungnir, and the back of the shield hit Thor's head hard. "Look who's here. The hero who saves the world." Demonized Loki pointed Gungnir at Link. "I've been annoyed with you for a long time. A voice has been telling me to kill you." Before he finished speaking, a strong light burst out from the head of demonized Loki's gun, and a ball of light containing divine power hit Link. Link was not to be outdone, and his body was boiling with lightning. Zabo appeared behind him, pointed forward, and snapped his fingers. "Go. Thunder power." Link also snapped his fingers, and the crackling thunder power instantly collided with Gungnir's divine power. The two strong energies consumed each other and annihilated each other. Loki said disgustedly, "It's lightning again. I hate thunder and lightning. But I like it very much." Thor under his feet said. Lightning exploded below Loki's perspective. "Welcome to join group 783,563,733 and ask the author to urge for updates." Chapter 113 Original Sin. When Loki's attention was focused on Link, Thor took the opportunity to jump up, with electric sparks all over his body, as if he was burning. The electric current spread along Loki's legs, and Loki screamed and rushed off the bridge. Thor shouted, "Loki, I will definitely save you." He just stood up, took 2 steps, coughed, and knelt on the ground. He had just fought with Loki briefly, and was seriously injured. Just now, he ignored his injuries and forcibly triggered lightning, causing Thor to be in great pain all over his body. Link used the power of Gungnir to rush over to check and said, "How are you?" His hand just touched Thor's shoulder, and was hit hard by the residual electricity in Thor's body, and he quickly let go. Link and Thor both screamed, and then asked each other in confusion, "Are you afraid of electric shocks? Don't you use electricity?" The two fell into a short period of awkward silence. Suddenly, the remaining giant monster King Dodongo became agitated because of the departure of his master, the demonized Loki. Thor and Link quickly crouched down, and Thor said, "Do you still have electricity?" Link nodded. After Loki left, King Dodongo roared arrogantly, thinking of a big fight, but the bridge was too narrow, and he couldn't move easily. Just when he was about to start killing, suddenly, a strange sound came out of his head. King Dodongo looked up stupidly, and suddenly he felt 2 points on his head, and began to quickly disperse powerful electricity, which then enveloped his whole body. A huge longhorn toad, with blue electric light all over its body, made Hawkeye, who was standing in the teleportation room shooting arrows at the battlefield, feel pain in his eyes, and could not continue to aim. Link and Thor, two masters of electricity, suddenly released the power of thunder above King Dodongo's head. The power of thunder and lightning from both of them blended together and became more destructive. The huge King Dodongo was roasted from the inside out by the high energy electric current in just a few seconds. Link, who was standing on the head of the electrified King Dodongo, smelled the aroma of barbecue and even felt a little hungry. But now the battle is important, so there is no time to eat. After Link and Thor worked together to electrify King Dodongo, they were looking for Loki. Loki had already come to the teleportation room, and everyone else joined the battle. Monsters were still being released from the black hole. Hawkeye was in the teleportation room, responsible for shooting arrows for long-range attacks. Seeing the demonized Loki coming over, Hawkeye pointed the arrow feathers on his bow at Loki and said, "Do you think you can dodge my arrows?" Hawkeye shot an arrow. Because the arrow was a streamlined arrow with its characteristics, it flew at such a high speed that it made no sound. In the blink of an eye, it rushed in front of Loki. Loki stretched out his hand and grabbed the arrow feathers shot by Hawkeye, sneering, "Mortal arrows TSK." The arrowhead suddenly exploded, and a ball of light green gas enveloped Loki's face, making it impossible to see anything. Hawkeye pinched his nose and stepped back. Then he heard the frantic vomiting of the demonized Loki. Even from a distance, Hawkeye could still smell the strong stench. The battle-hardened top agent Barton actually felt that he was a little overwhelmed. Ever since Link cooked Durian and the whole shield building was in chaos last time, Nick suddenly had an idea and ordered the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. to develop a durian-flavored stench gas that was enough to suffocate people. Hawkeye thought it was interesting, so he took one and put it in the arrow. Unexpectedly, the first use was against a god. Loki is a god, and his own power is very terrifying. Coupled with the pollution and demonization of Ganon's curse, it is even more powerful. After a few rounds, Thor was injured and trampled to the ground. Hawkeye knew that his weapon might not be able to hurt the god of mischief, so he chose the foul-smelling gas of Durian. Even if you are invulnerable, even Thor can't kill you with a hammer. But how can you defend yourself against the stench? Demonized Loki suddenly screamed, his head covered with cannon pollution, and a group of big eyeballs appeared in front of him. Demonized Loki stretched out his hand. The cannon pollution covered his hand and turned into an extended claw, grabbing Hawkeye. Hawkeye hurriedly turned over to dodge, and his claw directly knocked open the wall of the teleportation room, and the whole circular building shook. After Hawkeye dodged the attack, he stood up and drew his bow and sword, but Loki had already rushed to him quickly. He pinched Hawkeye's face with his other hand. The dead big eyeballs stared at Hawkeye. Hawkeye's face was covered with a lot of cannon pollution, and he couldn't see anything. As an agent, he immediately pulled with both hands, and the bow in his hand was disassembled, revealing the overlapping knives inside, stabbing Loki's ribs. The demonized Loki's body shook, and the hidden knife in Hawkeye's hand was shattered. In order to punish Hawkeye, Loki used Ganon pollution to fix it on the wall of the teleportation room, covering all the gaps on his face. Hawkeye couldn't breathe and twisted on the wall in pain. Heimdall fought on the bridge with a giant sword, but the demonized Loki chose to use his own power to directly activate the Rainbow Bridge. A large amount of Ganon pollution squeezed out of the demonized Loki's body like thick water, connecting the top of the teleportation room and the sword groove. Under the interference of the cursed power, the Rainbow Bridge was activated. The tip outside the teleportation room began to rotate at a high speed, aiming at the position of Jotunheim in the sky. At this moment, Thor carried Link on his back, swung the hammer and flew over, landing on the ground. Link first saw that Hawkeye's face was covered with Ganon pollution. Although he couldn't see his facial features clearly, Link was very familiar with the black look in all seasons. Hawkeye was hanging on the wall and struggling. Link hurried forward to rescue him. Demonized Loki Gungnir stabbed at Link, but the flying hammer deflected Gungnir and created a big hole in the ground. Thor rushed over and shouted, "Loki, what are you going to do?" Although Loki's surface was covered with a layer of Ganon pollution and his eyeballs were very hideous, Loki's laughter could be clearly heard from the Ganon pollution. Of course, it is to destroy Jotunheim. As long as this Rainbow Bridge does not stop, Jotunheim will slowly collapse. Thor was furious. "Father is sleeping, now let your brother wake you up." He swung the hammer and smashed it. Demonized Loki laughed. "Are you going to use the hammer to knock me awake? You are not my brother," he roared, and the power of Gungnir, mixed with the power of Ganon's curse, made the brightness of the surrounding space suddenly dim. Thor stood there in a daze, holding the hammer high above his head. He looked down at his chest, and felt his own strength and warmth rapidly flowing out of the Gungnir spearhead that was inserted into his chest. Even though Thor and Loki had fought to this extent, Thor still didn't want to believe that Loki would kill him. Thor was stunned and looked at Loki and stuttered, "Loki, you hit me so hard." Thor knelt on the ground. Loki is a great character. There are many plots of patricide and parricide in Western mythology. Chapter 114, Fight. 4th update. Hawkeye was almost suffocated to death. Link went forward to rescue him, missed it and thrust out a sword. The sword light was fluctuating. Link shook his wrist and broke the Ganon pollution in front of Hawkeye. Hawkeye breathed heavily, staring at the empty sky with lifeless eyes, saying some weird words, which even sounded a bit like Ganon's mumbling. This was because the Ganon pollution eroded his mind. Hawkeye was collecting in his brain, and the mental pollution brought by the Ganon pollution was invading. Link quickly pulled Hawkeye off the wall, put him on the ground, and slapped Hawkeye hard several times. Link's hand strength was now enough to swing the steel bars and jump rope. The strength was so great that Hawkeye's mouth and nose bled, and his face swollen. Link was stimulating the rich nerves on Hawkeye's face so that Hawkeye could wake up quickly. Otherwise, the longer the time dragged, the more seriously Hawkeye's spiritual world would be damaged by the power of Ganon's curse. This is Hawkeye, whose will is several times stronger than that of an ordinary person. If other people were covered by so much Ganon pollution, they would have gone crazy long ago. Hawkeye's face was swollen like a bun. Natasha would definitely laugh at him happily. Link saw Hawkeye's eyes slowly returning to normal from the chaos, revealing the kind of resolute and bright eyes that only archers have. Link was just about to join forces with Thor to fight Loki, but turned his head. Loki stabbed Thor with the tip of his gun. Link cursed, jumped up and stabbed with a sword. The power of thunder followed, missed it in, like a knife and an axe, and stabbed Loki. Loki seemed to be a little dazed, and was hit by the power of thunder. His body hit the wall, and the big eyeballs on his face trembled wildly. Link rushed over, and pulled out the Gungnir in Thor's body. Thor knelt on the ground dejectedly, gasping violently. Link had never seen Thor so tired. Link placed his hand on Thor's bleeding chest, and a layer of ice covered it, freezing the damaged organs in Thor's body. Thor's body trembled and curled up on the ground. Although this would make Thor suffer a lot, Link knew that he had to do it. Looking at the blood of the gods on his hands, Link looked coldly at the demonized Loki who stood up. Link didn't know whether it was Loki's will, the will of Ganon's curse, or both. But Loki stabbed Thor. Link saw it clearly. Thor collapsed to the ground, and it was unclear whether he could survive for an hour. Link picked up Gungnir in one hand and Mjolnir in the other. With two artifacts in hand, Link could clearly feel that both artifacts were angry. After the demonized Loki stabbed Thor, Loki's mind was briefly shaken, and the power of Ganon's curse took over his body. His body was completely covered by Ganon's pollution. Link. Loki's voice came from the Ganon's pollution, but strangely, Loki spoke in Hylian. Link immediately knew that Loki had been devoured too much by Ganon's pollution. He had to defeat him as soon as possible, otherwise Loki would become a madman forever. Whoosh. A lot of lightning burst out of his body, and then the hammer slipped out of his hand, and the lightning penetrated into the hammer and shot out. Link followed closely, and Gungnir stabbed out countless spears. A thick arm made of Ganon's pollution suddenly emerged from the chest of the demonized Loki, and it grabbed Thor's hammer at once, as if it was trapped in a swamp, and tightly surrounded Thor's hammer. The thunder power in Mjolnir collided, and tore with the powerful curse power around it, and finally fell into a state of exhaustion, and was controlled by the demonized Loki. After grabbing Thor's hammer, the Ganon polluted arm clenched into a fist and hit the spear fiercely. The spear made holes in the Ganon polluted fist, but the thick fist still knocked Link away, and hit him against the wall, next to which happened to be Hawkeye, who was a little unconscious. The demonized Loki's attack directly knocked off 3 bars of Link's health. Hawkeye looked at Link blankly as he hit the wall. The wall shook violently and almost collapsed. Link slid down, and a long blood stain was left on the wall due to the smash of Link's head. It looked a bit scary. Hawkeye asked hurriedly, "Link, are you okay?" "Oh." Link held his head with both hands, and his ears were full of strange sounds. Several after images appeared in front of him and shook. Hawkeye's voice beside him seemed to be spoken from under the quilt. "It's good that you woke up. Go out and get some fresh air and wake up." Link gritted his teeth and stood up, rushing over again with a spear in hand. A vibranium shield immediately appeared in his left hand. His fist flew over, and the vibranium shield bounced it back. Loki hit the wall hard, and the big eyeball on his face trembled, staring at Link fiercely. Link threw Gungnir fiercely, which was wrapped in the power of thunder, and poked at the eyes of the demonized Loki. The demonized Loki used the big arm on his chest to knock Gungnir down. Suddenly, his body trembled, as if blood was gushing out, and black light emerged. Loki's shoulders shook, and a large arm made of Ganon pollution squeezed out of his chest again, making the control room particularly crowded. Hawkeye was still in a daze. "What the hell is this?" Link replied coldly, "This is nothing." Suddenly, a shout came from outside. "Link!" Iron Man flew over desperately, and Princess Washang ran towards this side on the bridge, obviously to help Link. It must be said that Princess Washang's movements were too elegant. She ran so fast and was so beautiful. Link had already thought of a plan. He only needed to restrain the two polluted arms of the demonized Loki, and then let Tony take the opportunity to attack the big eyeball on Loki's face, and then he could defeat the demonized Loki. But Tony shouted, "You kid, you didn't call me when you were fighting. Are you going to compete with me for the headlines? I want to ask, are there any newspapers in this palace where the gods live?" Snap. Just as Tony was sinking and about to fly into the teleportation room, the arm of the demonized Loki suddenly fell down, as if it couldn't bear the gravity. Like a python, it quickly calculated the entrance of the teleportation room and blocked it. Thor was flying at high speed and had no time to brake. He suddenly hit the cannon pollution. He cursed, "Damn. What is this thing? It's so sticky. Will it damage my armor?" Jarvis's calm voice came, "Yes, sir. This substance will indeed rot your armor, and it will be very fast." Tony struggled to get out of the sticky cannon pollution. The unparalleled princess who had just arrived here also sighed, grabbed Tony's arm, and pulled him hard. Link sighed tiredly. "It seems that I still have to fight alone. There should be another update before 12 o'clock. I will try my best." Chapter 115. Victory and defeat are reversed in an instant. 5th update. 5th update completed. Please subscribe. Please support. Hawkeye is confused. Thor falls to the ground, and the outside world is blocked. Although a hole was knocked out of the teleportation room, it will take some effort for others to find these skeletons. At this moment, it is Link and Loki. No, it is the two-person battle between the Ganon power in Loki's body. Link opened his hand, and under the effect of the magnetic grabber, Gungnir quickly fell into Link's palm. Link pointed at the demonized Loki. "Give me a minute. I will be able to defeat you." A muffled sound came from the demonized Loki's body. Suddenly Loki floated in the air, and countless spider-like thin legs poked out of his body. He stood high on the roof of the teleportation room. At this moment, the demonized Loki no longer looked like a human. There were deformed and huge arms on his chest, and his waist was full of thin legs made of Ganon pollution. It felt like some strange life made up of spiders and human organs. Link was used to this kind of thing. When he fought the four beasts, each calamity Ganon looked particularly ugly. The demonized Loki raised a spider leg and stabbed at Link. Link rolled over to dodge. Gungnir's spear stabbed out and pierced Loki's lower abdomen, but Loki's body shook and dodged. Link detonated the bomb and flew up on the shield. He heard a sound and looked down. It turned out that when he detonated the bomb, Thor happened to be next to him. Link didn't pay attention and blew Thor into the wall. Link said silently, "Sorry, the bomb is not very powerful." Although it is not very powerful, it still has many uses. Link aimed the bomb at the roof and threw it. Boom. The bomb didn't even blow up the roof, but it created a huge impact, causing the demonized Loki to collapse suddenly, and his height was the same as Link. Link summoned Gungnir, aimed at the demonized Loki's eyeball, and stabbed it. But at this moment, the demonized Loki's huge arm had already hit him, and suddenly a small arm bulged on the arm and punched Link. Link used his shield to block it, so he didn't have time to block the big arm. so he was hit again, and the flying Gungnir also poked a hole when the demonized Loki shook his head. Link hit the wall again with a bang, and this time the blood on the side of his head made Link's hair red and yellow. Hawkeye was sobered up directly, and when he was about to reach out for his weapon, Link was dizzy and didn't forget to blink at Hawkeye. Hawkeye, who was good at understanding other people's facial expressions, guessed Link's plan in an instant and continued to pretend to be in a state of unconsciousness due to Ganon's contamination and corrosion, sitting on the ground like a fool and staggering. While Hawkeye was acting, he was a little surprised. Why did his face feel so painful? Why did his eyes feel smaller? It must be the work of the demonized Loki. Hawkeye blamed Ganon himself. Link was hit hard on the head twice in succession, plus some minor injuries, and only 4 blood bars were left. Because the demonized Loki and Ganon contaminated too much, almost filling the entire control room, so Link's activity space was very small, and some attacks could not be defended at all. The demonized Loki began to attack, and black light emerged from his body, as if there was a crack in the world without light and space. The whole control room was filled with a terrible atmosphere. The power of Ganon's curse spread in the control room, and it was so strong that, if an ordinary person stayed here for too long, he would go crazy. The body of the demonized Loki made a disgusting sound of slurry flowing. The huge fist on his chest rushed forward, and a large amount of black flames suddenly emerged from his body. Like a bat, he flew towards Link with his wings flickering. Several spider legs also stabbed at him like spears, attacking from all angles. In this situation, Link summoned Darkle. The hero of the Drum Clan shouted, and full shield counter exploded. All means of attacking Link at this moment were bounced back by Darkle. The giant hand in front of the demonized Loki's chest shrank, and suddenly revealed Thor's hammer hidden in the scene. Under the traction of magnetic force, Link grabbed it in his hand. Then he mobilized all his strength, and a large amount of thunder power was brewed inside Thor's hammer. Link swung the hammer at the demonized Loki. It seemed that the demonized Loki did not dare to be arrogant, and the huge cannon-contaminated arm was across his chest to block it. Link's hammer hit his arm, and violent electric current shot out, like dozens of white snakes dancing and twisting. The cannon-contaminated arm began to disintegrate like boiling water. Link held Thor's hammer and chopped into it like an axe, injecting strength into it and cutting the cannon-contaminated arm into 2 pieces. Just when Link was about to smash the ugly face of demonized Loki with the hammer, demonized Loki suddenly stretched out and blocked the hammer. Crack. This was the sound of Demon King Loki's wrist being broken under the thick cannon pollution. The hammer was only 10 centimeters away from the big eyeball. Demonized Loki caught Link's last-ditch attack. A large amount of cannon pollution came out of his hands twice, wrapping Thor's hammer. Link was stunned and simply let go of his son and shot an arrow directly to explode the eyeball. But the demonized cannon also surrounded him. The arm that was cut off by the cannon pollution suddenly turned into a pool of mud, rushed up to Link, and surrounded him from bottom to top, leaving only the head exposed. Link's face changed color and was about to struggle. Suddenly, the force of Ganon's pollution, squeezing and corrosive, came from all directions. Link was immune to Ganon's pollution, but because of this immunity, Link, who had an extremely high tolerance for pain, screamed, "Link, you will finally die in my hands." Link felt his bones creaking all over his body. He knew that after a while, his bones would be broken under the strong pressure, and his death would be extremely ugly. Ganon hated Link deeply, just as Zelda hated Ganon deeply. Seeing Link suffer, the demonized Loki planned to torture Link slowly. But Thor, who was lying on the ground, suddenly groaned in pain. This groan almost made the remaining will of Loki collapse, and then he struggled desperately. Ganon's cursed will was worried about accidents, so he planned to simply end Link. He resisted the impact of Loki's original will, and said to Link coldly, "I will let you die now." But Link suddenly smiled. A loud shout came from below. "It's not certain who will die yet." Hawkeye shot an arrow. When he shouted, he had actually shot the arrow out. He wanted to take advantage of the enemy's unpreparedness. But then Hawkeye's face changed. Because his arrow hit the eyeball, but it didn't burst. "How can the power of mortal hurt me?" Link was not panicked at all, and said, "What about the power of the artifact?" HMM. The light shot from a very close distance, and exploded Ganon's cursed eyeball. Link's limbs could not move, so he had quietly controlled Gungnir and approached silently. He was only 1 meter behind Loki's head, and he couldn't dodge at all. The conditions for using Gungnir are not as strict as Mjolnir. If Loki can use it, then the power of the magnetic grabber controlled by Link can also be used. Activating the long-range attack device, a beam of light shot out and hit the big eyeball on Loki's head, just like Loki hit Laufey. Please subscribe. Welcome to join group 7,835,637,733. Chapter 116. Thundergod's Death. Gungnir hit the eyeball on Ganon's curse, and the eyeball twitched, shrank like a deflated balloon, and then exploded. The Ganon pollution attached to Loki's head was like snow seeing the sun, and it quickly dissolved, first revealing Loki's oily hair with a lot of hairspray, then a striking hairline, and then his red and trembling eyes. Loki opened his mouth and desperately vomited out the Ganon blood. It seems that the Ganon pollution is not just covering the surface, but also infiltrating Loki's body. Link's body shook, and the power of thunder burst out, and his whole body was shining with white electric light, like a crystal doll. The strong electricity was enough to penetrate a large building. The electric light spread to the Ganon pollution, and then a lot of burnt smell came. The Ganon pollution wrapped around Link quickly shrank and dried, and finally turned into ashes, and was broken into pieces, and exploded by the bright electric light. Link fell to the ground, and his whole body was in pain. Mipha quickly appeared, emitting a large amount of light from both hands. Blue flames swept through Link's body, causing the injuries in his body and the 2 injuries on his head to be repaired quickly. The Ganon pollution on Loki's body was destroyed just now. Loki fell to the ground hard and hit a hard object. The Ganon pollution blocking the door also collapsed with a loud noise. Tony sat on the ground, with a layer of corrosion marks on his armor and leg armor, still smoking. Princess Washan rushed over, and saw Link's head was bleeding. Half of his face was covered with blood. His originally shiny golden hair was also stained with dust and blood, and it looked a little dull. This made Princess Washan angry. Looking at Loki who was lying on the ground, and struggling to stand up, she raised her sword, to chop off Loki's head. Loki looked at his brother who was lying on the ground in a daze, his heart tormented by more than 100 emotions. The remaining Ganon pollution in his brain also caused Loki to have a mental breakdown all of a sudden, holding his head and screaming. Tony's eyes were blurred. He heard his brother's cry, and saw Princess Washan stabbing with a sword. He wanted to stop her, but he didn't even have the strength to stretch out his hand. He could only watch, but in the blink of an eye, Thor saw that Princess Washan missed her attack, and stabbed in the air. Loki suddenly turned into a wisp of smoke and disappeared. Princess Washan glanced around and saw a barely perceptible black shadow going up along the Ganon pollution on the device that opened the Rainbow Bridge. Link, regardless of the pain, shouted, "Hurry up and eliminate the Ganon pollution here." Although the battle between Link and the demonized Loki was not long, at the speed of the Rainbow Bridge, it is estimated that 1/10 of Jotunheim has been destroyed. Okay. Princess Washan saw the black shadow flash by and ran away to somewhere, so she knew that she had missed the opportunity to kill Loki, and she slashed with her sword. The shining sword light was very beautiful, and it slashed on the Ganon pollution. It was like a piece of ice cream on a heated iron, and the Ganon pollution seemed to have encountered a natural enemy and quickly disintegrated. If Link is immune to Ganon pollution, then Zelda's attack is a restraint on Ganon pollution. The 2 are as irreconcilable as darkness and light. There was a clang sound in the teleportation room, and the rotating tip above began to slow down. The Rainbow Bridge disappeared, and Princess Washan hurriedly helped Link up. Tony looked at the way Link and Princess Washan depended on each other, and thought to himself, little Zelda's life will be miserable in the future. In order to distinguish between Zelda and Princess Washan, Tony called Zelda, the world of Breath of the Wild, Little Zelda, and Princess Washan, the world of Zelda Washan, Big Zelda. Tony distinguished them based on their appearance, because compared to the little girl Zelda, Princess Washan looked much more mature and beautiful. But in fact, Zelda is 100 years older than Princess Washan. Hawkeye relaxed when he saw that the crisis was over. Seeing that Tony was still sitting on the ground wearing Iron Man, he thought that Tony had fallen down and had a problem with his waist, so he stepped forward and tried to pull Tony up. As a result, Tony waved his hand and said, "No, thank you." The connecting parts of the armor have been rusted together due to the unknown substance contaminated by this cannon, and now the movement of the suit is very stuck. Jarvis, disband this suit. The iron suit fell apart like a paper house whose glue had failed, leaving only a helmet covering Tony's face. Tony took off the helmet with one hand and reached out with the other hand. He was pulled up by Hawkeye and thanked him. "Thank you." "But, who are you?" "Hawkeye, Clinton Barton." Tony looked at Hawkeye, who had a pig-like head, with a face full of shock. "How did you get beaten into this state?" Hawkeye didn't look in the mirror, but he knew his face was swollen just by touching it, so he said depressedly, "Loki did it. Sooner or later I will shoot Loki's head. He even killed his own brother." Thor fell to the ground, motionless. Tony and Hawkeye came over, and Tony said, "We are the humans who have witnessed the fall of the gods." Hawkeye reached out to touch Thor's nose, and it had stopped, so he sighed. Mythological characters often have relatives killing each other. I didn't expect that I would see such a thing with my own eyes. Hawkeye once read fairy tales to his 4-year-old daughter. When he saw the content of the mythological stories, he always didn't know how to explain to his daughter why the gods and sons killed each other. Link was helped over by Princess Washang, and he squatted down with a grin. Princess Washang and Mipha shouted at the same time, "Slow down. Be careful." Princess Washang looked at Mipha. Because of her upturned eyes, Mipha was a little scared. This made Princess Washang stunned, and she thought to herself, "Am I fierce?" Link squatted down. At this moment, the others also eliminated all the enemies, leaving the roasted King Dodongo on the bridge, and hurried into the teleportation room to check. Thor was seen blocking the ground with his eyes locked. Sif shook her head violently. "Impossible. Impossible." Thor, the most majestic Valstag, burst into tears. Heimdall lowered his eyes and saluted Thor. Hogun sighed and said, "Thor needs a grand funeral." But Link looked up and asked in confusion, "Who said Thor is dead?" Ah. Everyone was shocked. Because of the depressing atmosphere, everyone thought Thor was dead. Hawkeye said, "But I just checked. Thor really has no breathing and heartbeat." Link shook his head. "He's not dead." Link knows the plot. In Avengers 3, Thor suffered the energy impact of the dwarf star's core in order to forge Thunder Axe, but he didn't die. How could such a strong body be killed by a bullet? So Link thought that Thor was in a state of suspended animation. As for how to wake up, if nothing unexpected happens today, there should be 5 updates. Thank you to Mimon Lanayu for your support of 700 Kidian coins. Thank you to Minecrafter for your support of 100 Kidian coins. Thank you to Lily Shooping for your support of 1200 Kidian coins. Thank you to all book friends for your recommendation votes, subscriptions, and rewards. I hope you can continue to support this work. Welcome to join group 783,563,733. Chapter 117, Awakening the Thunder God. At this moment, the goddess Hylia's murmur suddenly came to his mind. Complete the hero's trial. Obtain the first stage of the power of the clone. Link immediately felt as if something had been added to his body, as if another stomach had grown inside his stomach. Link was in a daze. Tony hurriedly said, "Yes, yes, yes. Link has a lot of strange skills. So, Link, can you revive Thor for us to see?" Everyone's expectant eyes were focused on Link. Link was helpless. "If I could revive life, why would I fight Ganon?" Ganon killed one Link and revived one. Link shook his head. "No." Hawkeye asked curiously, "I remember you seemed to have died once and finally revived." Link said, "That was Mipha's power, and it can only revive me." Mipha also said, "Link, you must not take too many risks. Just because I can revive you, I don't even know if I can wake you up again after you die next time. After all, life is too complicated." Mipha said in a babbling voice. Only Link, Princess Washang, and Tony, who could understand her Hylian language, could understand it. Others just felt that this lovely fish girl was speaking a rhythmic language that was pleasant to the ears, even though they couldn't understand it. Some electricity was released from Link's fingertips, which crackled and exploded, causing the faces of the people around him to light up and end him. Thor was still sleeping, and indeed seemed to be dead. Link said, "Shall I try to charge Thor? As the god of thunder, he should be able to wake him up with the power of thunder and lightning." Link placed 2 fingers on Thor's chest with his left and right hands, and suddenly they lit up. The strong electricity was enough to roast an elephant in an instant. A large amount of thunder power penetrated Thor's body, and Thor immediately began to tremble. Oh. Thor was awakened by the electricity as soon as he was on the field, and sat up straight like a zombie, and his head hit Link's head. Link only felt a blackness in front of him, and was hit by Thor's head, causing his nose to bleed, and he fell to the ground. Princess Washang and Mipha were concerned again. Link covered his nose and groaned. Mipha used the blue flame on his body to help Link repair himself. What happened to me? I was stabbed by Loki. Oh. My chest hurts so much. Am I not dead? Thor looked around in confusion. Then he heard his Asgardian warriors cheering. Tony was muttering, "It seems that naming the new element after Link is a good choice. Link is like a big battery now." Hawkeye said, "You were injured. Your breathing and heartbeat stopped. It was Link who saved you." Thor said, "Who are you?" Hawkeye was so angry that veins popped out on his face. It was not easy to have veins popping out on a swollen face. Thor stood up, looked at Link sitting on the ground, and said sincerely, "Link, thank you for saving me. You are a friend of Asgard. Why are you sitting on the ground? I will pull you up." Thor stretched out his hand to Link. Link was pulled up by Thor with a gloomy face and approached quickly. Thor thought Link was going to give him a warm hug to commemorate this great victory. As a result, Link raised his fist, jumped up, and punched Thor's nose hard. Thor's nose was bleeding, and he sat down on the ground at a loss. He didn't know why Link hit him. Link's whole body was shining with electricity. The blood on his head, face, and body was shattered, and fell to the ground. After the lightning evolution, his body was cleaner than all the humans on the earth. Link rubbed his nose and said sullenly, "It's back to you." Thor was puzzled and everyone laughed. After the war, Thor came to Jotunheim under the teleportation of Heimdall. After checking the planet, although 1/10 of it was destroyed, as a frost giant struggling to survive in a harsh place, this disaster was nothing. Thor returned to Asgard again, regardless of the horrible wound on his chest, and shouted to drink a cup with everyone. Tony, Link and others went there happily. Thor was happy, but also a little sad. After all, his brother had broken up with him. Tony was very proud to approach the beautiful women in Asgard, but was rejected by the beautiful women in Asgard, who liked strong men. This was a rare experience for Tony, which made him very frustrated. He had a lot of money, enough to party with beautiful women all over the earth for 1,000 years, but the scope of use was limited to the earth. In Asgard, Tony was a pauper. Sif, who was drinking on the side, said to Tony seriously, "Man, your muscles are too small. Our country doesn't like sissies." "I'm a sissy?" It was the first time that Tony received such an evaluation, and his eyes widened immediately. Even in the fanfiction with Rogers, he was always the attacker. "Okay." Tony shook his head and shook off those nonsense. Looking at him who was surrounded by a bunch of girls but remained unmoved, and was eating Asgard's delicacies seriously with pepper. "Why is Link so popular when he looks like a little girl?" Sif said. "Link. He is different. He just arm wrestled with Thor when Link was about to lose. He summoned Darkle to lend him strength. The simple Asgardians are very tolerant of Link's cheating, and he always won. He is very manly." Sif pointed at Thor with a glass of wine and said a little drunkenly, "And you, I'm afraid you can't even beat a woman here." Tony. In order to prove that he is a man, Tony and Hawkeye drank Asgard's specialty liquor together and fell into a puddle of mud amidst. Link, who was shouting at some kind of Warcraft barbecue, looked at the 2 drunken caterpillars twisting on the ground with disdain and muttered, "What's so good about wine?" Thor came up happily with a wine glass, patted Link's shoulder, and almost slapped Link into the plate. Thor laughed and said, "If you hadn't come up to help, I might not be able to deal with my stupid brother." Link suddenly said, "Loki should not be dead." Thor was shocked. "Really?" Link nodded. Thor said, "Then I will definitely find him back. I can't let him go astray like this." Link suddenly looked like he had a toothache. Now the Marvel timeline is a bit chaotic because of Link and Ganon's disruption. The next plot is when the Avengers appear collectively, the famous New York battle, and Link doesn't know when Loki will turn his eyes to the earth. The Mind Stone is a secret among secrets, and Nick will not let a strong person like Link easily touch the Infinity Stones. The only thing that is certain is that before the battle in New York, Link will have some time to rest. After thinking it over, he decided not to change the plot randomly. Uncontrollable things are the most dangerous, especially when the power of Ganon's curse is becoming more and more rampant. Thanks to Lily Shooping for supporting 200 starting coins. Chapter 118 New Skill Development. Third update. They were still at the party. Peppa poked Tony's butt with a branch. Tony didn't know what he was dreaming about, and he was giggling. Hawkeye turned over and slapped Tony in the face, and said in a daze, "That guy can't be eaten." After Link was full, he dragged Princess Washan to the martial arts training ground. Princess Washan was puzzled. Link told her that he had obtained the gift of Goddess Hylia and gained a skill, and asked Princess Washan to help him try it. Princess Washan held the sword and stood there coquettishly, tilting her head and asking in confusion, "What skill?" Link also held the Mitstein, closed his eyes, and awakened the new power in his body Zeng. There was a sound of drawing a sword out of the sheath, and Link's body seemed to walk into a four-dimensional space, stretched and deformed, and suddenly transformed into another Link. Compared with Link's original body, the color of this Link's body was darker, and his eyes were also dull, like a puppet, and it looked even a little scary. What was even more frightening was that the fluctuations coming from the clone Link's body were even no less than Link himself, which meant that this clone had the same strength as Link. Princess Washan was shocked to Link's. After 5 seconds, the second Link suddenly seemed to have run out of power, flashed twice, and disappeared. The remaining Link frowned and said, "There is a time limit, and it will only act completely according to my actions." No wonder it is only the first stage. Moreover, the consumption is a bit high. Link's current strength is much stronger than when he fought the Hulk, but he still felt a little tired from releasing this skill. Summoning the clone again, Link said to Princess Washan, "Get ready." Link and the clone simultaneously passed by with a sword energy, deliberately slowing down the speed, so that Princess Washan could have room to dodge. Princess Washan bravely faced the sword energy. She knew how powerful Link's sword energy was, so she used all her strength. Crack. 3 sword energies collided in the air, biting each other like 3 wild beasts. In the end, it was the power of the Washan princess that overwhelmed Link's tentative attack, shattering 2 sword energies, and still had enough power to charge at Link. Link took out his shield and was stunned for a moment before he realized that his clone had also taken out a vibranium shield, but like the clone Link, the color of the vibranium shield was darker than the original body, as if it was a low-quality replica. And the sword in the clone Link's hand was also Mistin, which means that the power of the clone can not only imitate people, but even their equipment. The clone Link imitated the original body's movements, threw a shield counter, knocked back the sword energy, and rushed back to the Washan princess, but Link rushed ahead, took out Mistin, and smashed the remaining sword light with one sword. Princess Washan was happy that Link had acquired a new skill. Great. With this skill, you can instantly double your combat power. Link deliberately kept the clone unchanged, controlling it not to dissipate. He stabbed the clone with a sword, and the clone also stabbed Link with a sword. The 2 swords collided in the air, and the 2 thin sword tips collided accurately. The sword beams of the 2 swords merged into one. Link opened his eyes wide, and saw that the sword beams of the 2 swords had merged together. The energy of the 2 swords continued rapidly, and the surrounding space twisted. Link could even hear an inexplicable subtle noise that was about to explode. He soon discovered the reason for the fusion of the 2 attacks. Because they were almost the same 2 attacks, there was no difference in frequency, energy, and even nature. It was just that the sword beam of the clone Link was much dimmer than the main body. The 2 collided with each other, and they could not even tell each other apart, so they quickly merged together. In the blink of an eye, a prototype ball of light was formed, and the internal power gathered together, like a small bomb. Link was surprised to feel that the power in his body was actually increasing at a very fast speed. The 2 swords collided, and the light ball was getting stronger and stronger. Finally, Link felt that the light ball in the center was about to be out of control, and he quickly aimed at the wall and swung it. Bang! The wall was very close to Link, and boom! It exploded. Link's eyes were white, and he quickly activated Darkle's protection and deployed the shield. But it was too late, and he was blown away by the strong wind and collided with the Washang princess behind him. The two hugged each other and rolled a long distance. Link raised his head and said depressedly, "Why are you so strong?" The Washang princess was under Link and said anxiously, "Get off me quickly." When Link lowered his head, he found that the Washang princess was lying under him, with her hair spread out on the ground behind her, her mouth slightly open, and her eyes were a little bit stuttering. Link pulled the Washang princess up, and the Washang princess smiled and gently stroked Link's hair, helping him to brush away the gravel on his head. Princess Washang said, "Did you notice? Just now, the power of you and your clone resonated and suddenly gathered together, bursting out a much stronger power than you, and your clone simply used your clone. Perhaps you can develop some powerful skills for this reason." Link smiled bitterly. "What skills are we still discussing now? I blew up Thor's palace." Thor and his friends were drinking and bragging happily and heard a noise from afar. The weak fluctuations made Tony throw his wine glass and open his hand. Thor's hammer on the balcony flew over and fell into Thor's palm. Thor, who invaded the Asgard. The atmosphere suddenly became solemn. Hawkeye and Tony, who were twisting and turning on the ground, were shocked by this. They felt the danger and suddenly became a little sober. They staggered with the crowd in a daze. In their current state, they couldn't walk alone. So Hawkeye and Tony hugged each other, as if pushing each other, and used their forelegs to move forward and keep up with the distance of the crowd. When Pepper heard the explosion, he jumped with a startled ah and hid under the table, trembling as he picked up a barbecue bone that Thor had gnawed clean and used it as a weapon. Thor rushed up first and saw the huge training ground. Half of the room was missing the ceiling and walls. This time, he could see a small light spot flying farther and farther away. It was the ball of light created by Link and his clone. The power had not yet been exhausted, and it was still running wildly in space. Thor took a breath of cold air, looked at the smoke-filled training ground, and shouted, "Who is it?" Then came Link's weak voice, "It's me." He was a little embarrassed. He came to visit someone, and actually demolished their house. Thor's hammer fell to the ground with a bang. His jaw almost dropped in shock, and he pointed in the direction of the light ball in the air. "What did you do?" If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 119 Odin's Anxiety, 4th update. What did you do? Thor looked at the messy ruins and walked around. He saw Link being supported by the Washang princess, looking very tired. Link was embarrassed, and the Washang princess explained for Link. "Link, he just received the gift of the goddess Hylia of our country and gained new power. He experimented in the martial arts training ground, and the result is like this." Link smiled apologetically. The light ball just now was almost out of control, almost draining all of Link's power, and the same was true for the clone. And when the clone was released, Link was shocked to find that the power deficit caused by the clone must be borne by Link. So Link was tortured by the double emptiness and had a hard time standing and even a little hungry. Thor and Link looked at the collapsed half of the martial arts training ground. Link was afraid that if he accidentally aimed at the place where Thor and the others were eating, instead of the place on the wall that was a little higher, I'm afraid that under the attack of his light ball, Thor, Tony, Hawkeye and others will be killed by Link. From then on, the Avengers were officially born to fight against the Devil Link. Thor was a bit nervous and not very good at managing money. Anyway, it was his father Odin who was in charge of the accounts in Asgard, and Odin was still lying in the recuperation room. If the palace was blown up, it would be blown up. Anyway, it would be rebuilt sooner or later. Thor also disliked the style of the palace, because it was a bit old. No matter how luxurious and grand it would be boring after more than 1,000 years. This palace looked like this more than 100,000 years ago. I'm afraid Odin is also tired of it. What Thor was most curious about was that his family's Asgard palace was very solid, and the materials used were all looted by Odin's father when he was young. It has not changed its appearance for hundreds of thousands of years, but Link actually easily destroyed a large area. How did he do it? What made Thor even more curious was the goddess Hylia mentioned by Princess Washang. Thor waved his hands at Link, who was apologizing. It's okay, as long as the enemy is not attacking. Hylia? What kind of god is she? Is she strong? Thor thought that he was a god, and goddess Hylia was also a god. They were both gods, so maybe they could meet and exchange their experiences of being gods. Link said, Goddess Hylia is the only god in Hyrule and the will of our world. All the power in me comes from the gift of Goddess Hylia. Okay. Thor was speechless. Link was so strong because Goddess Hylia cultivated him, and Thor might not even be able to beat Link. It seems that Hylia is a tough guy. Tony and Hawkeye pretended to hug each other intimately and moved over with four legs like crabs, looking at the bright sky outside and then at the pile of horrible ruins in front of him. Tony chuckled. Link blew up the house. Hawkeye corrected Tony seriously. What is a house? This is called a palace. Tony was dissatisfied. Isn't a house just a bigger palace? Hawkeye said calmly, your house is so big, why not call it a palace? Tony shook his head childishly. Not big enough. I'm giving my house and I to Link. I'm going to build a super big palace. From New York, all the way to Africa. I'm going to feed Peppa to the hippopotamus. One of them didn't hold on tightly, and they continued to twist like caterpillars while lying on the ground. Tony touched Hawkeye's swollen face and grinned. Hehe, hippos ass. Link disliked them from the bottom of his heart. Thor shouted, what's the big deal? It's just a martial arts training ground that was blown up. It's a small matter. Let's continue drinking. Although Thor looked reckless, he was a man who knew his limits and did not ask about Link's skills in detail. The people of Asgard were all very nervous, so they went to drink again. Thor was very considerate and carried Tony and Hawkeye on his shoulders and left. After they left, Princess Washang asked, how are you? Link smiled bitterly and said, I can't even stand up. It's terrible. He used up all the strength of the two Links and broke the martial arts field. He didn't know how high and how far he flew. Who knows which unlucky meteorite would be smashed into pieces by the light ball. Link. A woman's voice came from behind. Link turned around and saw Odin's wife, Thor's mother, and Queen Frigga of Asgard. Frigga generously allowed Thor to invite outsiders to hold a banquet, but she was still in the recuperation room to accompany the sleeping old King Odin. Link was even more embarrassed and returned a salute to Princess Washang. But Frigga didn't care much about the collapsed martial arts field, but smiled at Link and said, child, my husband asked you to go over. Odin has woken up. Frigga continued, you and this princess from another world can just come here, no need to call Thor. Princess Washang and Link looked at each other, not knowing why Odin woke up, and wanted to see him first. The two followed Frigga to the recuperation room, only to find that Odin was still lying on the bed, with a thin layer of golden light covering his body. Frigga stood at the door, just when Link thought that Odin had fallen into a coma again after a brief awakening. Odin's eyes were closed, but his mouth moved, and he said, Link, Zelda. Two children from another world. Princess Washang nodded. We are together. Odin said, I seem to have met the future while I was sleeping. Asgard was destroyed, and the whole universe was devastated. This is not the worst, because I saw a very ominous darkness suddenly expand, and then it seemed as if the world had completely disappeared. The world was very quiet, so quiet that there was no material at all. Princess Washang and Link looked at each other again, and the two exchanged glances. From Odin's narration of his dream, the first thing that Link and Princess Washang thought of was the Dark Lord Ganon. Odin continued, little hero from another world, I believe you have a mission on your shoulders. This burden is heavy. I want to ask you, can you bear it? Link nodded, and then found that Odin had his eyes closed, so he said, of course. Odin's tone was much softer. Is that so? I can hear the firm will in your voice. Your words are enough to help me resist the uneasiness in my sleep. I'm going to go back to sleep. You go. Link looked puzzled. Odin snored softly. Frigga said, Odin fell asleep again. I will take you away. Link left with a puzzled look on his face. Odin, the father of the gods, is an extraordinary existence with a full score of 7 in the personal values of Marvel heroes, and is incredibly strong. Such a terrible character actually needs Link's words to fall asleep. Chapter 120 Early Morning. 5th update. Thor planned to hold the banquet for 2 days and 2 nights. For the Asgardians with extra long lifespans, time is something that needs to be wasted. But Link always remembered a girl who was still on Earth, anxiously waiting for him to return safely. So Thor brought the 4 warriors of Asgard, with a drunkard in one arm, to the teleportation room. Heimdall's voice was mellow and low. "Kit, why don't you stay a few more days? I'm injured. You want me to tire myself to death by teleporting so many people? Let me take a breath, okay?" Exclamation mark. Of course, Heimdall didn't say these complaints. He wanted to maintain his steady and handsome personality. The great sword was inserted into the sword slot, and the rainbow bridge started. Link held a person in each hand, and said to Thor and the Asgardian warriors, "Goodbye." Thor smiled and nodded, "Okay." But in his heart he said, "You humans have such a short lifespan, I'm afraid we will never meet again." Thor would never have thought that he would often go to Earth in the future, and even planned to move Asgard to Earth. Peppa cheered in the arms of Princess Washang. "We are back." Link and Princess Washang stepped steadily on the ground. They saw Zelda sitting nearby in a daze, the firelight shining on her cute face with a sad face, and her willow leaf eyebrows drooped in disappointment. Her face was red because of the low temperature, and she was holding a cup in her hand, and the coffee in the cup had long been cold. "Ahaha!" Peppa shouted. As soon as Zelda looked up, her frowning face suddenly relaxed, just like the sun rising from the cold and damp mountains at dawn. The bright sunshine suddenly bloomed in Zelda's smile. "Link." Zelda jumped over the fire lightly and opened her arms to hug Link. Link saw Zelda's smile and suddenly became happy. He threw the 2 drunks on the ground and ran over to hug Zelda. The Washang princess rubbed Peppa's face in her arms with some jealousy. Peppa mumbled, "Who. Zelda was very happy. "You are finally back. I have been waiting for you here for a long time. You really came back intact." Link said, "The battle was easy." He concealed the difficulty of the battle process. Although the situation this time was not as embarrassing as the last time he faced Ivan, the power of the demonized Loki was even greater than that of the demonized Ivan. Link lost a lot of blood in the battle. "That's good," Zelda said with a grin. Zelda has always trusted Link, but she doesn't believe in Link's claim that the battle is easy. Because she had been fighting with Ganon for so long, Zelda could clearly feel how powerful the power of Ganon's curse was that was wrapped around Loki's body. The battle would definitely be painful and dangerous, but since Link wanted her to feel at ease, she would naturally pretend to feel at ease. Zelda looked at Tony and Hawkeye, who were still not honest, and continued to twist on the ground like caterpillars. Link said disgustedly, "Princess, take a video of these 2 guys with your camera and save it." When Link helped Hawkeye up, he was almost sprayed by Hawkeye's vomit. Hawkeye still said to Link with a squinting face, "Link, you really should go to Thailand. Your gender is a mistake." Link was furious. Zelda looked at them worriedly. "Tony, Barton, are they poisoned?" Link nodded. "There are aged wines in the wine cellar for thousands of years." So Link and Zelda, who were malicious, found their cameras and took many photos and videos. In some of the photos, Peppa joined in the fun, jumping on Tony's face. Carlson arranged 2 agents to protect Zelda, and Ethan also planned to wait for Link and Tony to return. At this moment, they were already asleep, and only Zelda was upset and sat outside in front of the fire waiting. It was very cold outside in the wilderness at night. Link saw that Zelda's nose was red, and it was estimated that she had been waiting for them for a long time. So he woke up Ethan and Carlson's agents. Several people drove to the city. Because the residents of this city had all fled, it was empty like a ghost town, a little gloomy. Ethan and Link found an empty hotel to stay in, and threw a large amount of cash on the counter, enough to make the owner so happy that he would rush to the bank to pay off the loan immediately. It was during the stay that something unexpected happened. Princess Washang looked at Link and Zelda in surprise. "You 2 are actually living together?" Zelda and Link blushed. Especially Zelda, being looked at by herself in another world with such eyes. This feeling Zelda said. After Link destroyed Ganon, I still often have nightmares, dreaming that Ganon is destroying the world. Only when Link is by my side can I sleep peacefully. Princess Washang sighed. It is indeed the me in another world. I'm the same. In my sleep, I always dream of Ganon, and of course, I also dream of Link who didn't come to save me. Peppa babbled. Then let's sleep together. Link, Zelda, and Princess Washang. The next morning, Tony woke up. As a playboy who likes to stay up late and have fun, sleep is not something worth lingering on. Tony woke up, and then he had a suffocating headache, as if Link had flicked his head with his fingers 100 times. Then Tony felt as if he was hugging something. When he opened his eyes, he saw a face that looked particularly large because it was too close. He could clearly see every pore of that person. This person was Hawkeye. Tony finally realized that he had actually hugged Hawkeye for a whole night, so tightly. Tony felt goosebumps all over his body. Tony hurriedly pushed it away and sat up suddenly. Suddenly, he felt a black screen in front of his eyes, as if the blood had been concentrated in his lower body for a long time. Tony stood up shakily and pushed open the door. Tony shouted, "Who arranged for Barton and I to live in the same room?" Tony had never slept with a man in his life. At this time, Zelda rubbed her eyes, opened the door on the opposite side and walked out. When she heard Tony's words, she said lazily, "There are really no rooms." At this time, Peppa also yawned and walked out of Tony's next room, stepping on his cousin shouting, "Eat, eat, eat, eat." Tony ran to Peppa's room with the help of the wall and found that there was no one else. He said angrily, "Why does Peppa live in a single room when he is so small, while Barton and I have to squeeze into one bed?" Peppa hugged his pointed nose with both hands and said to Tony seriously, "Tony, you stink too much." Tony was covered with the rancid smell of strong liquor coming into contact with the air. Link also walked out of the room, where Zelda came out and said, "See, Peppa despises you." 5 more. Welcome to subscribe. I recently reread the first non-textbook book I bought, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Looking at the complete set of Harry Potter books I collected, I realized why I love to use dashes and brackets so much. Chapter 121 Your Name. While eating, Tony kept complaining about Peppa having a separate room while he had to share a room with Hawkeye. Tony couldn't imagine that he and Hawkeye had been so close to each other for a whole night. Seeing Hawkeye walking down the stairs with a pale face, Tony got goosebumps again. The agents all looked a little strange because Hawkeye looked strange and pale after waking up. Ethan and Zelda acted as chefs and made a lot of food using the food materials in the store. Peppa was holding a table knife and struggling with the apple on the table. He almost cut off Hawkeye's finger accidentally. The TV hanging in the corner was broadcasting the news, analyzing why there were no monsters in the Red Moon this time. One by one, the experts said it seriously, believing that this periodic outbreak of monsters in the Red Moon was a rumor. There will be no monsters in the Red Moon in the future. Tony snorted. Since the helicopter was destroyed, Link and others drove to a larger city. Tony and Hawkeye parted ways, and their relationship improved a lot because of this battle. It's just that Hawkeye is a little unhappy. His face is still as swollen as a pig's head. Natasha will definitely laugh at him when he goes back to see her. But what happened in Asgard was too bizarre and weird. Hawkeye saw the existence of aliens with his own eyes for the first time. It turned out that the so-called gods were actually powerful aliens. He also drank with the famous Thor. He must report to Nick in person about the things in Asgard, the success of Link's prophecy, and the demonization of Loki. Sitting on the plane to the New York headquarters, Hawkeye hugged his arms and thought sullenly. Although the experience in Asgard was wonderful, it also made Hawkeye alert a brand new era is about to begin. I'm afraid that humans will have to frequently come into contact with alien life in the future. Although Hawkeye was thinking about something very profound, because of his swollen face, he applied a yellow-green swelling reducing ointment on his face. It was recommended by a curly-bearded uncle with a strong Mexican accent in the pharmacy, saying that it had miraculous effects. It was true. Hawkeye felt that he was cool and comfortable. But the ointment smelled too strong. It reminded Hawkeye of the durian cooked by Link, and the color of the ointment was also terrible, like vomit. Several agents were laughing because of this. Hawkeye glared at him. "What are you laughing at?" As a result, a piece of sticky ointment fell off his face and stuck to his legs, which was very disgusting. Tony, on the other hand, said goodbye to Ethan. He warmly invited Ethan to visit California, but Ethan politely declined, which made Tony a little sad. Watching Ethan drive away in his broken car from the 1950s, Tony unconsciously touched the reactor on his chest. It has not been long since he made the first battlesuit, less than half a year, but in less than half a year, he has experienced a lot of things. As for the Washan princess, as a princess of a kingdom in a magical world, everything was unfamiliar to her in a modern city. Zelda introduced various things to the Washan princess with great interest. The two of them had a very high rate of returning attention. First, because of their amazingly beautiful appearance, Zelda, like Link, looked very young, and their beauty was more cute, and the more they looked at each other, the more comfortable they felt. But the Washan princess was different. She was amazingly beautiful and blatant. Second, because of the Washan princess's clothing, a light armor with a skirt, and boots covered with bright silver leg armor that made a clattering sound when she walked on the ground. In addition, the crown of thorns on her forehead made the Washan princess out of place in this modern city, as if she was from another world, which she was. Although the Washan princess looked very indifferent and ignored the glances from passers-by, Link could feel that the Washan princess was a little flustered. Several people got on the plane and returned to their home in California. The Washan princess also joined Link's life. Tony was deeply touched by the Battle of Asgard, so he continued to immerse himself in the development of his new suit, almost to the point of forgetting to eat and sleep, sleeping only 4 hours a day, and being extremely efficient. On the basis of the original Iron Man, he added and enhanced many aspects. Tony was busy, while Link was much more relaxed. It was just that in life, there were two Zeldas instead of one, which caused some troubles. For example, the Washan princess often looked at Zelda inexplicably, sizing each other up, just like a cat curiously looking at itself in the mirror, full of curiosity and confusion. The two did not talk, so the atmosphere was a little awkward. Mipha could show up by herself, and often showed up to talk to Link. At this time, she quietly came over and said to Link faintly, "Do they dislike each other?" Link shook his head, "No." But Link was also worried. What if the two Zeldas quarreled? How should he deal with it? Peppa, who was standing on the sofa, jumped and wanted to touch Mipha's hair. Peppa has always been curious about this fishman princess, who can be seen but not touched. Link couldn't help but say, "Princess." Zelda and Washan princess answered at the same time, "Yeah." Then they looked at each other again, and looked at Link together. Washan princess asked, "Are you calling me or her?" Zelda suddenly frowned and expressed her confusion. "Link, I noticed that you always call me our princess and rarely call Zelda." She looked at Mipha, who was accompanying Link. "Mipha is also a princess. Why do you call her by her name?" Mipha didn't know why she was mentioned and subconsciously said, "Maybe it's because Link and I are childhood sweethearts." Hearing Zelda's words, Washan princess was puzzled. After all, calling her princess by status always sounds a bit strange. Could it be that Link just regards Zelda as a person of protection as part of his duty? This is indeed a serious problem. Four beautiful eyes looked at Link with doubt and a little worry. Link felt a little pressure, so he had to tell the truth. "Because, don't you think Zelda is a little hard to pronounce?" The two Zeldas were stunned. Link continued to explain with great effort, "When I say Zelda, my speech speed will involuntarily slow down, and it feels a little hard to pronounce, so I usually call you princess." Link has never liked to talk, and when he does, he tries to be as concise as possible. Although the two of them are in a relationship similar to that of a monarch and his subjects, they are close to each other, and naturally don't care about the monarch and subjects thing. Moreover, he doesn't like to call Zelda by her real name. And there is another reason, which he didn't say. That is, Zelda is not cute at all, and it's hard to tell whether it's a boy or a girl. And Link himself has been called Zelda several times, so he doesn't like this name very much. "My condition is a bit bad today. I don't know if I can maintain 10,000 updates. I'll try my best." Chapter 122 Man-Made Tsunami. During the quiet time before the battle in New York, Link began to study the power of his clone. He still remembered the time when he blew up the Asgard training ground. This was the first time that he had a power that he could not control. In the field outside, Link's body shook, and a shadow suddenly tore off from behind him, turning into a darker Link. His posture, breathing, the direction of his eyes, and even his hair were exactly the same as Link's. It was like looking in a mirror, indicating that the clone Link was just an illusion without his own thoughts. This actually made Link feel relieved. He was most afraid of encountering another situation. The clone had its own thoughts and actions, like a new and unfamiliar self, and Link would be terrified. Even if Zelda and Princess Washang looked and behaved nothing alike, they would still feel very strange knowing that each other was their selves from another world. Link and his clone crossed their swords again, releasing sword beams at each other. The power of the two people was gathered at the intersection of the two swords, forming a vortex at first, but after just 1 second, it suddenly lost control and devoured Link and his clone's power like a monster. Even if Link tried to stop it, he couldn't do it. After absorbing the power of the two, the light ball quickly grew larger, and the surrounding space was distorted. Link was more careful this time, and before he was drained of power by the light ball, he raised his sword to the sky. The pure white and transparent light ball, like a newborn sun, flew rapidly into the blue sky. The light ball became smaller and smaller, and finally disappeared. Link didn't know how far the light ball carrying his huge power would fly. The clone beside him disbanded, and Link immediately felt much more tired. Zelda, who was using a detector to observe, stood up, took off her glasses, and said in confusion, "Link, the power of you and your clone is the same. The frequency, fluctuation, and nature of the power used, so the two energies have merged and generated a suction force similar to an hourglass, which is difficult to control. If you are not careful, it is possible to drain all the power in your body. I suggest that you don't use this skill. It's too dangerous." Mytha flew out and hovered above Link's head. The light blue light warmed Link's tired nerves, and Link felt that his fatigue was relieved. Princess Washang was also there, observing carefully. She was powerful and could use the power of a third party to strongly interfere when Link encountered a crisis, such as when he was unable to get rid of the light ball and his body was drained by the light ball, so as to protect Link's life. Princess Washang stepped forward and asked Link, "I felt that you seemed to be trying your best to control the light ball just now." Link said, "Yes, I want to control the direction of the energy light ball, which is very difficult. If you are not careful, it may even hit you. Once controlled, my own power will be connected with the light ball, and the power will be absorbed more quickly. If I don't control it, the light ball will still grow in size, and it will produce a very terrifying explosion here." Princess Washang pondered for a while, and suddenly said, "Have you forgotten something? By the way, just let the light ball cannon explode." Princess Washang made a shield waving motion. "Remember that you have a very magical shield counter skill." Link's eyes lit up. He summoned his clone again, and the tips of the two swords collided with each other. The sword beams attracted each other, forming a vortex, and then madly drained Link's physical strength. Link hurriedly turned around with his clone to face the sea, and directly gave up control of the light ball. The light ball was like a red giant star on the verge of breaking, and it exploded in an instant, and the surroundings were covered by a burst of incandescent light. At the last second, Link and his clone quickly pulled out their vibranium shields and swung backhandedly. Tap! The light ball was repelled by Link's shield, flew across the sea, and then hit the sea far away, immediately raising huge waves. The splashes of water even splashed into the clouds in the sky. The mist was everywhere, and a vague rainbow hung majestically above the explosion of the light ball. From the center of the light ball that exploded into the water, huge waves were raised, and the sea surface quickly wrinkled up. The huge waves hit the cliff fiercely, and the place where Link was standing could feel a very obvious shock. The splashes of water that hit the cliff even submerged Tony's house at once. At this moment, Tony was lying in the underground laboratory, thinking about how to solve the trade-off between Iron Man's weight and endurance. Suddenly, the ground shook him to the ground, and the surrounding instruments, beakers, computers, and small accessories shook and fell. Tony yelled, "What's going on, Jarvis? This house can withstand an 8-magnitude earthquake." Jarvis's calm voice came over, "It's a wave outside." Tony muttered, "Are aliens invading the Earth? Is it the end of the world?" Jarvis checked the external monitor and said calmly, "No, it's Link's little experiment." Tony was puzzled. Link. When will he be able to trigger a tsunami? So he ran out in a hurry and saw that it was wet outside and the furniture was in a mess. When he went out, he saw Link being supported by Princess Washang and Zelda. Link looked like he had a broken waist. Tony put his hands on his hips and said, "Link, what amazing thing have you come up with again?" He complained in his heart. It seems that the anti-Link equipment needs further improvement. Link was very tired, but with the inspiration of Princess Washang, he was finally able to control the attack direction of the light ball. The large amount of water vapor outside suddenly blurred Tony's colored glasses. Tony took off his glasses and said, "You guys can have fun. I'm going to continue developing the battle suit." Then he returned to the underground laboratory to work. Tony has been obsessed with making armor recently. Epona. Link suddenly thought of his beloved horse and ran over to check. The big wave just now was enough to kill an adult. Link was worried that something might happen to his beloved horse. In the temporary stable Tony built, Epona was soaking wet and snorting, and her hooves were stomping around like a complaint. Although the cover on the top of her head was simple, it was very sturdy and did not let the heavy sea water hit Epona. But Epona still looked a little angry because she was soaking wet. Link touched Epona's face. Epona turned her head away. Link knew that the horse was angry. He had not played with Epona for a long time and had always kept her in a small stable. Although she had no worries about food and drink and had a cute little robot Damie to serve her and often came to help Epona wash her body. As a horse, what she wanted most was to run freely. So Epona was very dissatisfied with Link. Link understood the body language of horses very well, so he led Epona out and planned to ride her out to play for a while. Chapter 123 Local War. Epona hadn't run for a long time. As soon as Link led her out, she immediately wagged her tail happily and rubbed her face against Link's arm. Peppa quietly hid behind Zelda. Ever since Epona bit her butt last time, Peppa's biggest fear has become horses. Ha. On the plain behind Tona's house, Link held Princess Washang in his arms, and Epona ran wildly on the wet grass excitedly. Her mane and tail were pulled straight by the wind. Because Peppa was afraid of Epona, Zelda and Peppa hid in the house to watch TV. Princess Washang felt the ups and downs under her body and looked at the sea level. From a distance, she could still hear the ethereal sound of the waves. Link looked at Princess Washang, who looked worried, so he asked, "What's wrong?" Princess Washang said, "Ganon. Ganon makes me very uneasy. Ganon from our world has come to this world, and Ganon from your world has also come to this world. Perhaps what we will face is the most terrifying dark force in history." Link smiled and shook his head, holding Princess Washang's hand. Princess Washang relaxed herself and lay in Link's arms. Princess Washang said, "Goddess Hylia bless me to meet you. I hope she can also bless this world, not to be destroyed by Ganon, not like my world." Link asked, "You are not like Zelda." He paused. "Maybe this method is very strange. You can't feel Ganon's power at all?" Princess Washang shook her head. "Only a little bit." "That's Zelda." She also paused. "This method is really very strange. She is very powerful. She has mastered the complete Triforce. And I only have the wisdom part of the Triforce. Maybe this is why I'm not as good as her?" Link's face was strange, because Zelda also revealed her feelings to him, saying that she could not fight side by side with him like Princess Washang, which was a pity, and she also thought she was not as good as the other party. "We will defeat Ganon sooner or later, I have no doubt about it." After playing for an afternoon, the energetic Epona finally got tired and was moved back to the stable by Link to rest. As soon as he returned to the living room, he saw Peppa sitting in front of the table in a daze, his hands on the table, his two small black eyes staring at the big screen, and the two tentacles on his head swaying. Zelda smiled and said, "You're back. Are you hungry?" Link nodded. Zelda then put down the pillow, stood up, and happily prepared food for Link, just like a newlywed young wife. Link sat on the sofa with Princess Washang, who was a little regretful. "It's a pity I can't cook. What on earth are these two princesses comparing every day?" Puzzled, Link looked towards the TV and found that Peppa was not watching cartoons, but watching global real-time news. It was about a local war that took place there, and the fighting was very fierce. The picture was shaking, with broken ruins and roaring soldiers. This kind of news made Link feel a little uncomfortable. Aliens are about to invade the Earth, and these stupid Earthlings are still fighting each other. This war has displaced thousands of people, and the situation in Eastern Europe has become more complicated. Experts say, Eastern Europe, war? These two words reminded Link of two people, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. These two superheroes were in a small country in Eastern Europe. Their parents died in a war, and the weapon that blew up their parents was produced by Stark Industries. So Wanda and Quicksilver, brother and sister, have always been hostile to Tony. Zelda brought a lot of food over, and Peppa ran to hug the special pudding that Zelda prepared for him. Zelda went to call Tony to eat, but Tony was still focused on his work and didn't feel hungry. He said he would eat later. While Link was eating, he said to Zelda and Princess Washang, "Let's go to Eastern Europe tomorrow." The two Zeldas looked at each other, not knowing Link's intentions. At this time, Tony climbed up tiredly. His eyes were red. It seemed that he hadn't slept for many days, but he was still energetic. He heard what Link said. Eastern Europe? Link, you don't want to stop the fight. Tony sat next to Peppa, picked up the fork, and said to Link seriously, "Link, you must know that you are not an ordinary person. You can't get involved in the conflict of ordinary people, no matter how strong you are. Otherwise, you will find that you are in a dirty vortex and can't get out of it." As a former arms dealer, Tony is particularly sensitive to this kind of thing. He is afraid that Link will rush up and declare that he wants to stop the fight. This will definitely not be good for Link. Link shook his head. "No, I'm going to save two people. By the way, find out why your company's missiles appeared in Eastern Europe." Tony's face changed. "Damn it. Eastern Europe is not within the scope of our company's business. It must have been sold privately by that guy Abadia before." "Where did you see it?" Link said. "News." Tony said, "Well, if I can buy back the arms I sold to those arms dealers." The next day, Link flew to Eastern Europe with Princess Washang, Zelda, and Peppa. Because the situation in the war-torn country in Eastern Europe is very unfavorable, many airlines have stopped business to there. So Link asked Natasha to borrow the military transport plane of S.H.I.E.L.D. Because Link said he was going to Eastern Europe for no reason, Natasha didn't understand this weird behavior, so she asked Nick's consent and followed him. The transport plane pilot timidly parked the transport plane in the forest of the destination city and let Link and others down. The city was being bombed. Zelda used black-framed glasses with special detection devices to intercept the explosion sound coming here, analyzed it, and said, "This is indeed a missile produced by Tony's company." Link took out the vibranium shield and remembered that he forgot to return the shield to Rogers. He said to Natasha, "Wait until things here are done. Can you help me return the shield to Rogers?" Natasha smiled and said, "Of course." "But, what are you doing here?" Link said, "Save two people." In fact, Link had hesitated. If the parents of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver had not died, would the timeline of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver have changed? Perhaps because of Link's rescue, the two would have no chance to gain supernatural powers again. Link didn't hesitate for long, and immediately decided to save Quicksilver and Wanda. There is nothing to regret about the Earth losing two tragic superheroes who lost their parents. Chapter 124 Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Fourth update. Link walked towards the city with a murderous atmosphere, followed by Princess Washang, Zelda, and Peppa. Natasha followed. The driver, out of kindness, shouted, "Hey, are you going to die?" Natasha shook her hair, turned around and smiled. "It's safer to be with Link than in Wolf Castle." Princess Washang looked up at the shells falling from the sky and said, "So this is how people in this world fight?" Link used Jarvis's search ability to determine that the unawakened Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were in this city. He looked at the dead city in front of him. Link actually had some questions that he couldn't figure out. Stark's missiles were enough to destroy a city. Was it a bit of a waste to use them here? Moreover, were the superpowers of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver really awakened through the Mind Stone? In addition, under the strong inertia of the world line, Link helped them avoid the missiles this time, and there was no guarantee that there would be no other accidents. Led by Link, they came to the city. Soon someone shouted in the local language, "Who is it?" Link didn't understand. Zelda, who had learned many languages, immediately replied, "We are here to find two people." Those people didn't reply again. Then a group of soldiers came out from behind a house, holding rifles and shouting, "Raise your hands." However, except for Peppa who raised his hands obediently, no one, including Natasha, paid attention to the soldiers' threats. Zelda continued, "We will go in and take two people and leave." Link felt that communication was troublesome, so he walked directly inside. This immediately aroused the soldiers' tense nerves, and they opened fire directly. Link opened his hand and the magnetic grabber started. An amazing scene happened. The bullets attacking Link and others suddenly stopped in the air strangely, as if the world had stopped. Link and his companions continued to move forward. The soldiers were so shocked that they couldn't speak, but they still stubbornly pressed the trigger. A large number of bullets were fired, but they all stopped about 2 meters away from Link and others, and could not go any further. 2 meters away, a dense layer of bullet shells was spinning and smoking. Link snapped his fingers, and all the bullet films fell to the ground. He snapped his fingers again, and a large amount of lightning came out of his body, attacking the group of reckless soldiers at the speed of light, and electrocuted all of them to the ground. Link did not intend to kill them, so he just electrocuted them all. Natasha stepped forward and slapped a soldier hard in the face, making him sober up. Natasha said in the local language, "Take us to find who is Link looking for?" Link was also a little confused. He only remembered Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. He was not familiar with their names. He only knew that Scarlet Witch's name was Wanda. So he said, "Take me to a family with a girl named Wanda." Coincidentally, the soldier happened to know where Scarlet Witch's house was, so he took Link and others there tremblingly. Because of the series of gunfire from Link's side, the whole army stationed here, like an ant nest that was stepped on, began to rush towards the enemy frantically. Seeing Link and others, they shouted behind the bunker, "Stop, Zzz." Link snapped his fingers and hit, electrocuting several soldiers. The rest of the people fired at Link frantically, as violently as pouring water into a frying pan. But the master used the magnetic grabber to intercept them one after another. Just like before, Link scared a group of people speechless again. In the house, some curious children secretly opened the windows to watch, but then they were nervously pulled back by their parents and closed the windows again. The soldiers didn't have time to find out, but Natasha saw it, and she sighed. Link was a little upset, and he couldn't explain it, because he didn't speak the language. When encountering such soldiers who have suffered from war, and are full of depression and fear, if you want to suppress them, you must shock them. So Link put his hands together. All the bullets controlled by Link gathered in front of him, forming a 50-centimeter square ball. Then Link turned his wrist, and all the bullets on the ball were thrown out with a puff 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 sound, hitting all the soldiers around. All the soldiers squatted down with their faces covered. A soldier who looked like a commander came out, trying to put on a mighty and unyielding look and said, "Who are you? Why did you invade our garrison city?" This time, Zelda didn't need to say anything. Natasha directly spoke a series of local languages with an indifferent look. No one knew what she said. Then the commander showed a struggling expression and suddenly looked tangled, as if he was constipated, but didn't know why he was constipated. He shouted for his soldiers to separate and let Link and others pass through. After all, Natasha was an agent who was trained since childhood, and her communication ability, or threat ability, was much better than Zelda. The soldier held hostage by Link and his men was about to cry after being glared at by his commander. He was unwilling to help Link find the way. Natasha simply handed over the officer to show the way. Natasha smiled and said, "These soldiers usually live a monotonous life and don't know how to pay attention to the news. If they knew your identity, they would never stop you like this." They quickly arrived at Wanda's house. The door read Maximov. The officer shouted rudely, as if calling the people in the house to come out. So the family trembled, resisted and slowly opened the door, revealing a pair of old and frightened faces. A group of couples came out stiffly with their 2 children. The girl had red hair and a round face, and the boy had white hair. They were younger than Link remembered and basically looked the same age as Link. "Wanda?" Link said. "I am." Wanda said in a relatively stiff English. The stiffness did not come from unfamiliarity with the language, but because of fear. The family looked at the officer in panic, and Quicksilver was obviously a little angry. However, in this small Eastern European city, where a storm was about to come, a few beautiful girls suddenly appeared in front of them. They mistook Link for a girl again, and a hint of surprise appeared on their frightened faces. "I'm here to save you," Link said to Wanda in English. Wanda's stiff face was full of confusion. After Link finished speaking, he thought again. "How can I save them?" He thought for a while and said directly, "I want to take your family to live in the United States. Time is running out. Come with me." Chapter 125 Solution. 5th update. Natasha's expression suddenly became strange. "Sure enough, Quicksilver roared directly, "You want to take my sister away? I will never allow it." Link said, "Not to take you away, but to let you go to America." But Quicksilver vigilantly pulled the Scarlet Witch behind him. Quicksilver's parents said in the local language, "What are you going to do?" Natasha was very embarrassed and asked Link quietly, "What exactly are you going to do?" Link also replied in a low voice, "Now there will be a shell at any time, blowing up their house and killing their parents. I want to save them." Natasha said, "But you are too weird. The people in this city are shrouded in the shadow of war. You ignore it and only save their family? Let them leave their homes and live in a strange country. As a small family in a backward city, do you think they will abandon the hometown where they have been living and go with you who they don't know? If it were me, I would think you are liars, taking my sister to do human experiments or some other dark things. Normal people would think so." Link said, "This city will be destroyed soon." Natasha said, "But it's not destroyed yet. Even though the situation is so tense, there are still many families in this city, including Wanda's family, who have not evacuated. The war is not really burning on them. These ordinary families will not move easily. You have to understand. Information here is so closed, they have never even seen you, let alone go to America with you." Link scratched his head, and he found that his idea of changing the character's plotline was indeed a bit naive and reckless. At this moment, a roar suddenly came from the distance. The commander and the Scarlet Witch family looked up in horror and found that a missile flew from the sky and was thrown towards their home. Link said to Natasha, "Look, destruction is coming. The missile flying here is a weapon developed by Tony before, which can easily destroy this city. Unfortunately, Tony's product rarely misfired, and this missile was a dud." The Scarlet Witch family screamed in fear and wanted to flee. But at this moment, Link stretched out his hand and the magnetic grabber started. The missile fell heavily and suddenly stopped in midair, stopping in midair. Then Link pressed his hand, and the missile gently fell to the ground. The officer screamed in fear, and the voice was particularly sharp. It was obvious that he was frightened to the point of madness by Link's ability to catch the missile with his bare hands. He probably said some rude swear words, and Natasha glared at him with disgust. Wanda's family also stopped running and stared at Link dully like the eyes of goldfish. Link said to Zelda, "Take a picture of the missile. Let Tony see the duds of their company." He stepped forward and patted the missile in front of the horrified faces of the officer and Wanda's family, feeling a little complicated. It was mainly from Natasha's words. "The people of this whole city are shrouded in the shadow of war. You ignore them and only save their family?" He ran all the way from North America to Eastern Europe to save only Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver's family. As for other families without superhero sons and daughters, should he just do nothing? At this time, Zelda's satellite phone rang, and Tony's anxious voice came from it. "Give the phone to Link." Zelda handed the phone to Link with a worried look on her face. Tony shouted, "I know something is wrong. I won't ask you why you want to save 2 children from this small country, because you really have a lot of secrets, and I always feel that you know the future. So you always have your own purpose in doing things, and I won't interfere with you." Link turned around and looked for the camera, and suddenly found that one of Peppa's tentacles had a ring-like thing on it, which was Tony's miniature camera. "Oh, you finally found my third eye. You don't need to look at Peppa anymore. Let's continue. I always have a hunch When you go to that place with your way of doing things, you can't just sit back and watch. Those poor people who have suffered from disasters. Really? Are you thinking now, how can I end this war? How can I save the people here? Don't you think so? Remember what I said to you at the dinner table last night. Superheroes should not interfere in the struggle of politics. You will drag yourself into the quagmire. Pure white people in the grey world should not jump into it. Link looked up at the sky and said, who do you think will buy the bomb from a bad day? Tony was stunned, and then Link said, I will help you destroy your shells. Tony's face changed, but Link had already hung up the phone. Under the horrified eyes of everyone, he picked up the dud and said to Princess Washang, be careful. I'll be back soon. Link left with the bomb in his arms with some effort. The third day. So, what did you do that day? The news said that the war ended suddenly because you killed all the rebels. Tony was drinking coffee, and Peppa looked at Tony eagerly, thinking that he was drinking something secretly, so Tony poured some for Peppa. Now Peppa was vomiting and spinning like a zombie. Link said, how is it possible? If I kill so many people, I will have a mental breakdown. Tony raised his eyebrows. Then what did you do? Link, well, as you said, neither side of the war is completely just, but civilians are always innocent. I don't like to think too deeply. So I just arrested the leader of the rebel army and the president of that small country. Tony, you are too reckless. Link, it's not over yet. I locked them in a small room with a fire and roasted your Stark missiles on the fire, which scared them all night. By the way, I also put a book about the power of your bomb. Tony's throat moved. Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch were frightened by the unexploded squib, which was a microcosm of the fear of war. So Link also wanted the leaders of the war to have a taste of this, so that they would be afraid of war and the word Stark for the rest of their lives. Link, if you don't let me get involved in the war, I don't want to either. I don't like to think about things so deeply, otherwise it will affect my communication with the goddess Hylia. I won't think about the meaning of war, so I choose to let those guys think about it themselves. They seem to have figured it out, and the war is over. Tony. Link stood up. Wanda's family was saved, and I didn't run in vain. Tony narrowed his eyes. Link, can you really see the future? Link. Tony suddenly asked, then do you know what my future children will be like? Link, like to wear red tights, love to jump off buildings, climb walls, and learn from Tarzan. Tony. Sorry, it's 2 hours late. Thank you for the support of Lily Aquarius 900 starting coins. Thanks to Lee Jahu for the support of 100 Kidian coins. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.